Vivian Cross made the worst mistake of her life in the marble lobby of the Grandstone Hotel, and it changed everything. With her phone dead and her ex-boyfriend's wedding starting in minutes, she grabbed the arm of a stranger she thought was her hired escort. He wasn't. Damian Moretti was dangerous, powerful, and everything she should have avoided. But instead of walking away, he played along, becoming the perfect fake fiancé who made her ex burn with regret and her heart race with something far more reckless than revenge. One touch, one lie, one night that rewrote her entire future. If you want to see how this desperate plan unfolds into a love story that breaks all the rules, stay until the end and drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far Vivian and Damian's story travels across the world. The champagne-colored gown hugged Vivian Cross like a second skin, its silk fabric whispering against her legs with each determined step across the Grandstone Hotel's polished marble floor. She had spent 3 months' rent on this dress. 3 months of her graphic designer's salary gone in one reckless swipe of her credit card, all because she refused to walk into Adrian Vale's wedding looking anything less than devastating. Her reflection caught in the lobby's floor-to-ceiling mirrors, dark hair swept into an elegant twist, crimson lipstick perfectly applied, eyes that looked confident even though her hands trembled inside her beaded clutch. She looked like a woman who had moved on. She looked like a woman who had won. She was neither. "You're going to be fine," she whispered to herself, stopping beside a towering arrangement of white roses that probably cost more than her car. "You're going to walk in there with your head high, smile at everyone who pitied you, and show Adrian exactly what he lost." The plan had been simple. Hire a professional companion through an upscale agency, someone polished and handsome who could play the role of her adoring fiancé for one evening. Make Adrian regret every decision that led him away from her and straight into the arms of Margot Sinclair, the railroad heiress whose family money could probably buy a small country. Vivian had contacted elite companions 3 weeks ago. They had sent her profiles, photos, carefully curated credentials of men who specialized in exactly this type of arrangement. She had chosen Christopher Bennett, 6'2", honey blonde hair, charming smile, impeccable references from women who needed an impressive date for weddings, galas, and family reunions where showing up alone felt like social suicide. Christopher was supposed to meet her in the lobby at 7:30. She had memorized his photo, rehearsed their cover story, even created a fake engagement announcement that she could casually mention if anyone asked how they met. But when Vivian pulled her phone from her clutch to confirm their meeting location, the screen remained black, dead, completely drained despite charging it all afternoon. "No, no, no!" She pressed the power button frantically, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the useless glass. Nothing. The phone was as lifeless as her confidence suddenly felt. Panic crept up her spine. The wedding ceremony started in 20 minutes. She had no way to contact Christopher, no way to know if he was even here, no backup plan for this specific disaster. Around her, the Grandstone's lobby buzzed with Saturday evening elegance. Couples glided toward the elevators in formal wear. A string quartet played something classical and soothing near the concierge desk. Everything felt expensive, refined, completely unconcerned with the crisis currently unraveling inside Vivian's chest. She scanned the lobby desperately, searching for a man who matched Christopher's photo. Tall, blonde, charming smile, probably wearing a navy suit because that's what she had requested. The lobby was full of men in suits. None of them were looking at her. None of them seemed to be waiting for anyone. "Excuse me, miss." A bellhop approached with a professional smile. "Are you checking in?" "No, I'm just—" Vivian swallowed hard. "I'm attending the Vale Sinclair wedding. Do you know if it started yet?" "The ceremony begins at 8 o'clock in the Empire Ballroom, 3rd floor. You still have 15 minutes. 15 minutes to find a man she'd never met, in a hotel full of strangers, with no phone and no plan." Vivian forced herself to breathe. She had survived Adrian leaving her. She had survived him announcing his engagement 6 months after claiming he wasn't ready for commitment. She had survived every pitying look from friends who whispered about how quickly he'd moved on. She would survive this. "Thank you," she told the bellhop, moving deeper into the lobby with renewed determination. That's when she saw him. He stood near the bar that overlooked the lobby's central fountain, one hand in the pocket of an impeccably tailored black suit, the other holding a glass of what looked like scotch. Dark hair, sharp jawline, the kind of presence that made everything around him fade into irrelevance. He wasn't Christopher. This man was taller, broader, with an edge of danger that no escort agency would ever recommend. But there was something about the way he stood, patient, observing, completely unbothered by the chaos of the busy lobby, that made Vivian's desperate mind latch onto a terrible idea. He was alone. He was devastatingly handsome, and he was exactly the kind of man who would make Adrian Vale question every decision he'd ever made. Before rational thought could stop her, Vivian walked straight toward him. Her heels clicked against marble with each step. She had no plan, no script, nothing except the wild hope that this stranger might be Christopher in a different suit than she'd expected, or that she could convince him to help her, or that the universe owed her one miracle after months of humiliation. He noticed her approach. His eyes, dark, intelligent, unreadable, tracked her movement with the focused attention of someone who missed nothing. Vivian didn't let herself hesitate. She slipped her hand through the crook of his arm with practiced ease, leaning into him like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, her voice bright and affectionate, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Traffic was absolutely insane. The stranger went completely still. She felt the tension coil through his arm beneath her touch, felt the way every muscle seemed to sharpen with awareness. He looked down at her with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. This was beyond reckless. She was touching a complete stranger, pretending they knew each other, gambling everything on the desperate hope that he would play along instead of calling security. "Please," she whispered, "just for him. I'll explain everything. I just need you to pretend we're together for a few hours. I'll pay you whatever the agency charges. Please." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Not confusion, not irritation, something else entirely. Interest, maybe, or amusement, or the calculation of a man deciding whether she was worth the trouble. Then, instead of pulling away or demanding an explanation, he set down his scotch with deliberate care. "Traffic in this city is always a nightmare," he said, his voice low and rich, carrying an accent she couldn't quite place. "I told you to leave earlier." His free hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his arm. The touch was warm, possessive, exactly what a devoted fiancé's would be. Vivian nearly stumbled in shock. He was playing along. This dangerous, beautiful stranger was actually playing along. "You're right," she managed, trying to steady her voice. "I should have listened to you." "You never do." But he said it with a hint of warmth that made the words sound affectionate rather than critical. He guided her away from the bar with the easy confidence of someone who was used to being in control. They moved through the lobby together, her hand still on his arm, their bodies close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her think of Manhattan penthouses and dangerous decisions. "The wedding?" he asked quietly. "Third floor. Empire Ballroom." "And you need me to be?" "My fiancé." The word felt strange on her tongue. "We've been engaged for 3 months. We met at a gallery opening in Chelsea. You're an international business, but nothing too specific. We're madly in love." His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "Madly in love. I can work with that." They reached the elevator bay. He pressed the call button with his free hand, still covering hers with the other, maintaining the illusion of intimacy that was somehow starting to feel less like pretense and more like something dangerously real. "I'm Vivian," she offered. "Vivian Cross." "Damien." He didn't offer a last name, didn't provide any of the details that Christopher's carefully prepared profile had included. Just one word, Damien, delivered in that low voice that seemed to resonate somewhere deep in her chest. The elevator arrived. They stepped inside and Vivian watched the doors close on the lobby, on her escape route, on any chance to reconsider this absolutely insane decision. She was trapped in an elevator with a stranger, about to walk into her ex-boyfriend's wedding with a man whose last name she didn't know, whose profession was a mystery, whose entire existence was a gamble she'd made in a moment of pure desperation. "Breathe," Damien said quietly. He was watching her in the elevator's mirrored walls, his dark eyes missing nothing. "You look terrified." "I am terrified." "Of me?" "Of everything." Vivian forced herself to meet his gaze in the reflection. I just grabbed a random stranger in a hotel lobby and asked him to be my fake fiancé. I have no idea who you are. You could be anyone. I could be, he agreed. Does that change your plan? She wanted to say yes, wanted to press the emergency stop button and run back to the lobby and find some other solution that didn't involve gambling her safety on a man with dangerous eyes and a voice that made her skin prickle with awareness. But the elevator was already slowing for the third floor, and the alternative was walking into that ballroom alone, facing Adrian's pity and everyone's whispers, admitting that she hadn't moved on, that she was still broken, that he had won. No, Vivian said. It doesn't change anything. The doors opened onto a corridor of cream-colored walls and crystal sconces. Soft music drifted from the ballroom ahead, a string quartet playing something romantic and timeless that made Vivian's throat tighten. Damien stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her. The gesture was old-fashioned, protective, the kind of thing Adrian had never done in 3 years together. Then let's give them a show, Damien said. His hand was warm and strong, his grip confident without being crushing. When Vivian stepped out beside him, he didn't let go. Instead, he laced their fingers together with an intimacy that sent electricity straight up her arm. They walked down the corridor side by side. Vivian's heels sank into plush carpeting. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Everything felt surreal. The opulent surroundings, the beautiful stranger holding her hand, the absolute insanity of what she was about to do. 2 ornate doors stood open at the corridor's end, revealing the Empire Ballroom beyond. White flowers everywhere, hundreds of candles, rows of seated guests dressed in their finest. At the far end, beneath an arch covered in roses and orchids, stood Adrian Vale in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He hadn't seen her yet. He was talking to his groomsmen, laughing at something one of them said, looking completely at ease in a way that made anger bloom hot and bright in Vivian's chest. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had made all the right choices. Which one is he? Damien's voice was quiet, meant only for her. Front by the arch, dark blonde hair. Damien studied Adrian for a long moment. Handsome. I thought so once. You have better taste now. The comment startled a laugh out of her. Damien glanced down, and for the first time she saw something genuine flash across his face. Satisfaction that he'd made her smile. Pleasure that he'd eased even a fraction of her tension. Ready? He asked. No, she wasn't ready. She would never be ready for this. Yes, Vivian lied. They walked into the ballroom together. The ceremony hadn't started yet. Guests were still settling into their seats, greeting friends, admiring the elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than Vivian's annual salary. She recognized faces, Adrian's college roommate, his sister, colleagues from the investment firm where he worked. Several people noticed her immediately. She watched their expressions shift from polite interest to shock to poorly concealed curiosity. Vivian Cross, the ex-girlfriend who Adrian had unceremoniously dumped, walking in like she belonged here, looking stunning, holding hands with a man who made every other guy in the room look ordinary by comparison. Vivian, Adrian's sister Claire, appeared beside them with wide eyes. I didn't know you were coming. Adrian invited me. It was technically true. The invitation had come with a handwritten note about no hard feelings, and hoping you can celebrate this new chapter that had made Vivian want to set something on fire. I hope that's all right. Of course, it's just... Claire's gaze slid to Damien with obvious interest. I didn't realize you were bringing someone. This is Damien. Vivian tightened her grip on his hand. My fiancé. The word landed like a bomb. Claire's eyes went huge. Your fiancé? Oh my goodness, congratulations. When did this happen? 3 months ago. Damien answered before Vivian could, his accent making the words sound exotic and sophisticated. We met at a gallery opening in Chelsea. I saw her admiring a piece, and I knew immediately she was going to change my life. He looked down at Vivian as he said it, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. He was good at this, terrifyingly good. No wonder he'd agreed to play along. He was a natural actor, someone who could lie with absolute conviction. Or maybe it wasn't entirely a lie. Maybe there was something true in the way he looked at her, something real beneath the performance. That's so romantic, Claire gushed. Adrian, come here, you have to meet Vivian's fiancé. No, this was happening too fast. Vivian wasn't ready to face Adrian yet. Wasn't prepared for the moment when her ex-boyfriend saw her with another man, when the careful performance she'd planned became real and irreversible. But Adrian was already turning, already seeing her, his expression shifting through a dozen emotions in the space of a heartbeat. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been regret. Vivian. He crossed the distance between them with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. I'm glad you made it. He looked good. Adrian always looked good. Tall, athletic, with the kind of conventional handsomeness that opened doors and made people trust him. But standing next to Damien, he suddenly seemed softer, less substantial, like a sketch compared to a finished painting. I wouldn't have missed it, Vivian said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Adrian, this is Damien Moretti, my fiancé. She watched Adrian's face carefully, saw the moment the word registered, saw the flicker of something, jealousy maybe, or wounded pride, cross his features before he masked it with a practiced smile. Fiancé, congratulations. Adrian extended his hand to Damien. I'm Adrian Vale. Vivian and I used to date. I know. Damien shook his hand with the kind of grip that made Adrian's smile tighten slightly. She's told me a lot about you. The underlying message was clear. I know exactly who you are and what you did. All good things, I hope, Adrian said, but his laugh sounded forced, illuminating things. Damien's hand returned to the small of Vivian's back, a possessive gesture that made several nearby guests take notice. I should thank you, actually. If you hadn't been foolish enough to let her go, I never would have found her. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Adrian's expression froze somewhere between polite and insulted. Well, he managed. I'm glad she's happy. She is. Damien looked down at Vivian, and the way he said it, absolute certain, like he would personally ensure her happiness no matter what it cost, made her heart do something complicated in her chest. Aren't you, sweetheart? The endearment should have sounded fake, should have reminded her this was all a performance, a desperate lie she'd constructed to save face. Instead, it sounded perfect. Completely happy, Vivian said, and meant it more than she'd expected. I should get back to the groomsmen, Adrian said quickly. The ceremony is about to start. Enjoy yourselves. He retreated toward the front of the ballroom, his shoulders tight, his easy confidence cracked just enough for Vivian to notice. Claire was still hovering nearby, practically vibrating with curiosity. How long have you two been together? 7 months, Damien answered smoothly. Though it feels like much longer, when you know, you know. And you're engaged already? When you find something precious, you don't wait to claim it. His thumb traced a small circle against Vivian's back. Life is too short for hesitation. That's beautiful, Claire sighed. What do you do, Damien? International business, import and export mostly. It keeps me traveling, but Vivian makes coming home worth every flight delay and time zone. He was weaving their cover story with effortless charm, adding details that made their fake relationship sound textured and real. Vivian barely had to speak. Damien carried the conversation with the kind of natural charisma that made people want to believe every word. More guests drifted over, drawn by curiosity or genuine affection for Vivian. She introduced Damien again and again, watched him charm Adrian's judgmental aunt, make Adrian's business partner laugh, compliment the maid of honor on her dress in a way that was flattering without being flirtatious. He was perfect, too perfect. Every gesture calculated, every word chosen with precision, his hand never leaving her body, her back, her waist, her hand, maintaining constant physical contact that announced their connection to everyone watching. And people were watching. Vivian felt their eyes like a physical weight, saw the whispers behind raised hands, caught the envious looks from women and the assessing stares from men. She had wanted to make an entrance. She had wanted Adrian to regret losing her. Mission accomplished. Guests, please take your seats, a coordinator announced. The ceremony will begin in 5 minutes. Damien guided Vivian toward the rows of chairs with his hand still at her back. They found seats in the middle section, close enough to see everything but far enough back to avoid the family rows where Adrian's parents sat. As they settled into their chairs, Damien leaned close enough that his breath ghosted against her ear. "You're doing beautifully. You're the one doing all the work. You hired me for that." "I didn't hire you. I assaulted you in a hotel lobby. A much more interesting meet-cute than most people get." His mouth curved. "How am I doing? Am I believable as your devoted fiancé?" Vivian turned to look at him fully. The ballroom's candlelight caught in his dark eyes, softened the sharp angles of his face, made him look almost approachable despite the danger that seemed to radiate from him like heat. "Too believable," she admitted quietly. "I keep forgetting this isn't real." Something shifted in his expression. The smooth charm dropped away for just a moment, replaced by something raw and more complicated. "Maybe that's the point," he said. Before Vivian could ask what he meant, the string quartet launched into the wedding march. Everyone stood as the bride appeared at the ballroom's entrance. Margot Sinclair looked like something from a fairy tale. Her dress probably cost more than Vivian's car and apartment combined. All flowing silk and delicate lace. A cathedral-length train that required 2 attendants to manage. Diamond earrings caught the light with every movement. Her veil was vintage and priceless. She was beautiful, perfect, everything a railroad heiress should be. Vivian felt inadequate in a way she hadn't expected. Yes, she looked good tonight, she'd made sure of that, but Margot existed in an entirely different stratosphere. Old money, refined taste, the kind of elegant beauty that didn't require trying. Damien's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together with gentle pressure. She glanced at him. He wasn't watching the bride. He was watching her. "You're more beautiful," he said quietly, meant only for her ears. "You don't have to say that." "I don't say things I don't mean." The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. This was all fake, all performance. But the way he looked at her felt desperately, dangerously real. Margot glided down the aisle on her father's arm. Adrian watched her approach with an expression Vivian recognized. The same one he'd worn when he talked about promotions at work, or successful deals, or anything that confirmed he was making the right choices. He looked satisfied, proud, like he'd won. Maybe he had. The officiant began speaking about love and commitment and the joining of 2 hearts. Vivian tried to listen, tried to feel something about watching her ex-boyfriend marry another woman less than a year after breaking her heart. But all she could focus on was Damien's thumb tracing slow circles against her palm. The warmth of him beside her, the steady presence that made this entire nightmare bearable. The ceremony progressed. Vows were exchanged, traditional, safe, nothing that revealed any actual intimacy between Adrian and Margot. Rings were presented. The officiant pronounced them married. Adrian kissed his bride with the enthusiasm of someone checking an item off a to-do list. Everyone applauded. Vivian clapped politely, her hand still linked with Damien's, watching the happy couple make their way back down the aisle as husband and wife. "You survived," Damien murmured. "I did." Vivian took a shaky breath. "Thank you." "The reception will be harder." He was right. The ceremony was passive. They'd sat, watched, avoided direct interaction. But the reception meant hours of mingling, of maintaining their performance, of dancing and toasting and pretending her heart wasn't a complicated mess of old pain and new confusion. Guests began standing, migrating toward the adjoining ballroom where dinner and dancing awaited. Damien rose smoothly and offered his hand. "Stay close to me," he said. "I'll make sure no one sees anything except what we want them to see." Vivian took his hand, let him pull her to her feet, followed him into the reception with the strange certainty that she'd crossed some invisible line. She'd hired a stranger to play a part, but somewhere between the lobby and this moment, it had stopped feeling like acting. The reception ballroom was even more extravagant than the ceremony space. Crystal chandeliers, tables covered in ivory silk, centerpieces of roses and orchids that probably cost hundreds each. A live band occupied one corner, already playing soft jazz. The bar stretched along the far wall, gleaming bottles and expert bartenders ready to serve. Name cards directed guests to their assigned tables. Vivian found hers. Table 12, far from the head table where Adrian and Margot would sit, but close enough to stay visible. "At least they didn't hide you in the back," Damien observed, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. Vivian sat, smoothing her dress, trying not to notice how his hand lingered on her shoulder for just a moment longer than necessary. Their table mates arrived gradually. A couple from Adrian's office, one of his college friends with her husband, Margot's cousin, and his girlfriend. Everyone made polite introductions, asked curious questions about how Vivian and Damien met, offered congratulations on their engagement. Damien fielded every question with practiced ease, building their fictional relationship into something rich and convincing. He remembered details Vivian mentioned and wove them into new stories. He made people laugh, charmed Margot's cousin, impressed Adrian's colleague with vague references to international markets. Dinner was served, salmon, or filet mignon. Vivian barely tasted hers. She was too aware of Damien beside her, his leg occasionally brushing hers under the table, his attention constantly returning to her even while conversing with others. He played the devoted fiancé perfectly, too perfectly. Between courses, Adrian's college friend leaned across the table with wine-bright eyes. "So tell us the proposal story. Was it romantic?" Vivian's mind went blank. They hadn't discussed this, hadn't planned that far into their fiction. "Very romantic," Damien answered smoothly. His hand found Vivian's under the table, squeezing gently. "We were in Paris. She thought we were just having dinner, but I'd planned the entire evening around asking her." "Paris?" The woman sighed. "That's incredible." "We walked along the Seine after dinner. It was late spring, warm enough that she didn't need a jacket. There was this violinist playing near Pont Alexander III, and I asked him to play her favorite song." Vivian stared at him. He was making this up completely, weaving it together from nothing, and yet it sounded absolutely real. "What song?" someone asked. Damien looked at Vivian, his dark eyes holding hers. "La Vie en Rose. She doesn't know I know it's her favorite, but I pay attention to everything about her." It wasn't her favorite song. She'd never mentioned it. But the way he said it, the intimacy, the certainty that he knew her deeply, made Vivian's breath catch. "I got down on one knee right there on the bridge," Damien continued, still holding her gaze, "told her that every day before I met her was just marking time, that she made the world make sense, that I wanted to spend every remaining moment of my life making sure she never doubted how extraordinary she is." Silence fell across the table. Even the cynical investment banker looked moved. "What did you say?" Margot's cousin's girlfriend asked Vivian. Vivian's voice cracked slightly. "I said yes. Obviously. Before or after you cried?" Damien's thumb traced her knuckles. "She cried for 5 minutes straight, wouldn't even look at the ring until she composed herself." "I did not cry for 5 minutes. 7 then. I counted." Their table mates laughed. The moment broke. Conversation shifted to other topics, other stories. But Vivian couldn't shake the image Damien had painted. Could almost see the bridge, the violinist, the warm spring evening. Could almost believe it had really happened, that somewhere in a parallel universe, this beautiful, dangerous man had actually fallen in love with her. The band transitioned to upbeat music. Adrian and Margot took the floor for their first dance, a rehearsed, competent performance that looked pretty but felt empty. When it ended, other couples joined them. The investment banker asked his wife to dance. Margot's cousin led his girlfriend onto the floor. Damien stood and offered his hand. "May I?" They hadn't discussed dancing. Vivian wasn't even sure she could manage it without falling apart. But refusing would break the illusion, would make people wonder why the devoted fiancé and his future bride weren't participating in the celebration. She took his hand. He led her onto the dance floor with confident grace, one hand settling on her waist, the other holding hers in a classic waltz position. The band was playing something slow and romantic, all strings and gentle piano. Damien moved like someone who'd learned to dance properly, not just survived middle school dances. He guided her through the steps effortlessly, making her look graceful even though her legs felt unsteady. "You're good at this," Vivian said. "I've had practice." "At fake engagements?" "At dancing." His hand tightened on her waist. "Though I'll admit this is my first fake engagement." They turned slowly, Damien leading her through other couples. Vivian caught sight of Adrian dancing with Margot, saw him notice her, saw his expression tighten. "He's watching," she murmured. "Good. Let him watch." Damien pulled her slightly closer, until there was barely any space between them. Let him see exactly what he lost. The position put Vivian's hand on his shoulder, her body aligned with his, close enough that she could feel the solid warmth of him, the controlled strength in the way he moved. "Tell me something real," she said suddenly. Damien's eyes met hers, questioning. "You've been lying all night," Vivian explained, "making up stories about Paris proposals and gallery meetings. Tell me one true thing about yourself." He was quiet for a long moment, just moving with the music, considering. "I haven't danced with anyone in 3 years," he finally said. "I told myself I was too busy, but the truth is nothing felt worth the effort of pretending to enjoy it. And tonight I'm not pretending." The confession hung between them, more intimate than anything else that had happened. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous. This whole situation was dangerous. She knew nothing about this man except that he was willing to lie effortlessly and dance beautifully and look at her like she mattered. "Why did you agree to this?" she asked. "When I grabbed you in the lobby, you could have said no, could have walked away. Why didn't you?" Damien spun her gently, then pulled her back. "Honest answer?" "Please." "Because the moment you touched me, I wanted to see where it would go." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "Because you looked desperate and fierce and absolutely stunning, and I couldn't remember the last time anything surprised me." "That's insane." "Probably. You don't even know me. I know you're brave enough to walk into your ex's wedding alone. I know you'd rather gamble on a dangerous stranger than admit defeat. I know you bite your lip when you're nervous and your hands shake when you're scared, but you don't let anyone see it." He tilted his head slightly. "How am I doing so far?" "Too well." He was reading her too well, seeing too much, making this feel far too real for an arrangement that was supposed to end the moment they left this ballroom. The song ended, applause rippled through the reception. Damien released her slowly, his hand sliding away with obvious reluctance. "I need some air," Vivian said abruptly. "I'll be right back." She fled before he could respond, weaving through the tables toward the hallway. The corridor outside the ballroom felt blessedly quiet and cool after the hot press of bodies and music. Vivian found a restroom, locked herself in one of the elegant stalls, and let herself shake. This was supposed to be simple. Hire someone to pretend, make Adrian jealous, leave with her dignity intact. She wasn't supposed to feel anything, wasn't supposed to develop genuine attraction to a stranger who was only here because she desperately grabbed him in a moment of panic. But every touch felt electric. Every word he spoke seemed designed to unravel her. Every time he looked at her, she forgot they were lying. The restroom door opened. Heels clicked on tile. Multiple women chatting and laughing, probably guests coming to fix their makeup. "Did you see Vivian Cross?" one voice said. "I almost didn't recognize her. That dress. And that man." "I know. Where did she find him?" Adrian looked like he swallowed glass when she introduced him as her fiancé. Laughter. Mean, satisfied laughter that made Vivian's stomach clench. "Good. He deserves it after how he treated her." "Please." He upgraded. "Margot Sinclair's worth millions." Money isn't everything. Money is everything when you're Adrian Vale. He was never going to marry someone like Vivian. Pretty enough, I suppose, but completely ordinary. No connections, no family money, no real future. The words cut like knives. Vivian pressed her hand over her mouth, fighting the urge to scream or cry or burst out of the stall and confront them. Her fiancé seems very successful. International business? That's what everyone says when they don't want to explain what they actually do. He's probably nothing, just better at faking it than she is. The ring looked real. Any decent jeweler can make something look real. Their voices faded as they left. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. Vivian leaned against the stall door, breathing carefully through her nose. They were wrong. They had to be wrong. She wasn't ordinary. She wasn't nothing. But their words echoed Adrian's actions. He had left her for someone better, someone with money and connections and a last name that opened every door. Someone who existed in a world Vivian would never access. She couldn't go back out there. Couldn't face more pitying looks or cruel whispers or the performance that was getting harder and harder to maintain. The restroom door opened again. "Vivian?" Damien's voice, low and concerned and completely inappropriate for the women's restroom. "You can't be in here," she called out, trying to steady her voice. "The door's locked. No one else is coming in." A pause. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar. Despite everything, Vivian almost laughed. She wiped her eyes carefully, trying not to smudge her makeup, and unlocked the stall door. Damien stood near the sinks, looking completely unbothered by the fact that he'd just walked into the women's restroom like he owned it. His dark eyes tracked over her face, noting everything: the redness around her eyes, the shakiness of her breathing, the careful way she held herself together. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing. Just needed a minute." "Vivian?" The way he said her name, gentle but firm, like he wouldn't accept deflection, broke something inside her. "Some women came in," she admitted. "They didn't know I was here. They were talking about me. About how ordinary I am, how Adrian upgraded, how you're probably faking being successful, just like I'm faking being happy." Anger flashed across Damien's face, dark and dangerous. "Their names." "What?" "Tell me their names." It doesn't matter. It matters to me." He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness. "You're not ordinary. You are not nothing. And anyone who makes you feel less than extraordinary deserves to be corrected." "It's fine. It's not fine." His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "And I'm going to tell you something true, Vivian, something you need to hear." She looked up at him, caught in his dark gaze, barely breathing. "I am not who you think I am," Damien said quietly. "I'm not an escort. I'm not some hired companion playing a role." Vivian's heart stopped. "What?" "I was at this grand stone for business. My own business. When you grabbed my arm in the lobby, I should have corrected you, should have explained the mistake." "Then why didn't you?" His hands were still on her face, holding her like something precious and breakable. "Because the instant you touched me," he said, "I wanted you." The confession detonated between them like a bomb. Vivian couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was saying. "I own things," Damien continued, his voice low and rough. "Companies. Properties. Parts of this city that most people don't even know exist. I operate in spaces where the rules are different, where power matters more than law, where one decision can end or save lives." Understanding crashed over Vivian like ice water. "You're dangerous." "Yes." His jaw tightened. "I'm not a good man, Vivian. I've done things that would horrify you. Built an empire on choices that decent people don't make. I should have walked away the moment you mistook me for someone safe." "But you didn't." "No." His eyes burned into hers. "Because you looked at me like I could save you from your worst night, and I haven't wanted to be someone's hero in longer than I can remember." Vivian should have been terrified, should have pushed him away and run, but all she felt was the shocking thrill of understanding. The danger she'd sensed wasn't imagination. It was real. He was real. "So this whole night," she whispered, "everything you said, the performance was fake. What I feel isn't." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I want to know what your real laugh sounds like. Want to know what you look like without armor. Want to give you everything those cruel women said you'd never have." "Why?" "Because you grabbed my arm in a hotel lobby and gambled everything on a stranger." A slight smile curved his mouth. "And I've built everything I have on knowing when to double down on a good bet." Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful or questioning or tentative. Damien kissed her like a man claiming something that already belonged to him, his mouth fierce and demanding against hers, one hand tangling in her carefully styled hair while the other pressed against her lower back, pulling her against him. Vivian gasped, and he deepened the kiss, tasting like expensive scotch and dangerous promises. Every nerve in her body ignited. This wasn't acting, wasn't performance. This was real want, real heat, real connection crackling between them like electricity. She kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his suit jacket, rising on her toes to get closer. The bathroom's cold tile, the distant music from the reception, the fact that anyone could try the locked door, none of it mattered. All that existed was this man who'd appeared from nowhere and changed everything. When Damien finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers, his hand still holding her close. "Come with me," he said roughly. "Leave this reception. Leave these people who made you feel small. Let me show you what it's like to be worshipped instead of tolerated." Vivian's heart hammered. "I don't even know your last name." Moretti. Damien Moretti. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. And I don't care about your ex-boyfriend or his railroad heiress or anyone out there except you. This is insane. Completely. I should say no. Probably. His mouth curved against her skin. Are you going to? Vivian thought about walking back into that reception. Thought about more pitying looks, more cruel whispers, more hours of pretending she was fine while Adrian enjoyed his perfect wedding to his perfect bride. Or she could leave with this beautiful, dangerous man who kissed like sin and looked at her like she was the only person in the world worth seeing. It wasn't even a choice. No, Vivian whispered. I'm not going to say no. Damien's smile was pure triumph. He kissed her again, shorter this time but no less intense, then took her hand and led her toward the door. They left the restroom, left the corridor, left the Grandstone Hotel without looking back. Somewhere behind them, a wedding reception continued without them. Adrian Vale danced with his bride, probably never realizing that Vivian had stopped caring the moment a stranger's kiss rewrote her entire world. A black car waited at the hotel entrance. Sleek, expensive, driven by someone who clearly worked for Damien and asked no questions when he opened the door. Vivian slid inside. Damien followed. The door closed, cocooning them in leather and darkness and possibility. Where are we going? She asked. Anywhere you want. Damien's hand found hers again, lacing their fingers together. As long as it's with me. The car pulled away from the Grandstone, carrying them towards something Vivian couldn't name. Not safety, not certainty, but something that felt more real than anything she'd experienced in years. She'd walked into her ex's wedding planning to fake her way through one evening. Instead, she'd found something dangerous and thrilling and completely unexpected. And for the first time since Adrian left, Vivian felt absolutely, wildly, perfectly alive. The city blurred past the car windows in streaks of neon and shadow. Vivian watched Manhattan transform as they drove. The polished luxury of Midtown giving way to older neighborhoods where the buildings pressed closer together and the streetlights cast everything in amber. She should have been terrified. She was sitting in the back of a stranger's car, being driven to an unknown destination by a man who'd just confessed to operating outside the law. Every rational instinct screamed at her to ask the driver to stop, to get out, to run back to the safety of her ordinary life. But Damien's hand was warm in hers, his thumb tracing slow circles against her palm, and Vivian felt more anchored than she had in months. You're quiet, he observed. I'm processing. Having second thoughts? Vivian turned to look at him. The passing streetlights painted his face in alternating light and shadow, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his dark eyes. He looked dangerous. He looked exactly like what he'd admitted to being. I should be, she said. I should be panicking right now, but I'm not. Why not? I don't know. She shook her head slightly. Maybe because this entire night has been surreal from the start. Or maybe because you've been more honest with me in the last hour than Adrian was in 3 years. Damien's expression softened slightly. Your ex is a fool. He's a successful investment banker engaged to a railroad heiress. I'm pretty sure he won. He had you and let you go. That's not winning. That's catastrophic failure disguised as ambition. The certainty in his voice made Vivian's chest tighten. She'd spent months trying to convince herself that Adrian leaving wasn't a reflection of her worth, that his choices said more about him than her, but hearing someone else state it so absolutely made something inside her start to heal. The car turned onto a quieter street lined with renovated brownstones. The driver pulled smoothly to the curb in front of one with iron railings and windows glowing with warm light. This is yours? Vivian asked. One of my properties. Damien stepped out and offered his hand. I thought you might prefer somewhere quieter than a restaurant. But if you'd rather go somewhere public, no. Vivian took his hand and let him help her from the car. Quiet sounds perfect. The driver departed without a word, leaving them alone on the sidewalk. Damien led her up the stone steps to a heavy wooden door that opened with a biometric lock. Everything about the entrance spoke of serious security wrapped in elegant design. Inside, the brownstone was stunning. Exposed brick walls, hardwood floors that gleamed in the low lighting, furniture that managed to be both comfortable and obviously expensive. But it didn't feel cold or impersonal like some luxury spaces. There were books on the shelves, art on the walls that looked chosen for meaning rather than investment value. A lived-in quality that suggested this was actually a home. "Can I get you something to drink?" Damien shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over a chair. "Wine? Scotch? Water?" "Wine would be good." He moved to an understated bar cart and poured 2 glasses of red with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his space. Vivian accepted hers, took a careful sip, and tasted something complex and probably very expensive. "So," she said, "international business." Damien's mouth curved. That was the polite version. "What's the impolite version?" "I control several operations that exist in the spaces between legal and illegal. Import, export protection, information brokerage. Things that powerful people need done but can't be seen doing themselves." "You're a criminal." "I prefer entrepreneur with flexible ethics." He took a sip of his wine. "But yes, by most definitions, I operate outside conventional law." Vivian should have been horrified, should have set down her wine and called a car and left immediately. But curiosity burns stronger than fear. "And the people you work with? They're dangerous?" "Very." "Have you—" She stopped, not sure she wanted to know the answer. "Have you hurt people?" Damien met her gaze directly. "Yes, though I prefer not to. Violence is expensive and draws attention. I've built my reputation on being smart enough to avoid it when possible and ruthless enough to deploy it when necessary." "That's terrifying." "I know." He set down his glass. "Which is why I gave you the truth before anything else happened between us. You deserve to make an informed choice about whether you want to be anywhere near me." Vivian walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a small private garden. The city sounds felt distant here, muffled by expensive glass and careful design. She could see her reflection in the window, still wearing the champagne dress she'd bought to impress her ex, hair slightly mussed from Damien's hands, lipstick kissed away. She looked different, felt different, like she'd stepped through some invisible membrane into a version of herself that was braver and more reckless. "At the wedding," she said quietly, "you told everyone we met at a gallery opening that we fell in love over art. That was the cover story. But you have art here. Real pieces, not just decoration." She gestured to a painting on the nearby wall. Abstract, beautiful, clearly not mass-produced. "So that part wasn't entirely a lie." "Most good lies contain some truth." Vivian turned to face him. "Tell me a truth now. Not about your business or your empire. Something personal." Damien considered her for a long moment, then moved to stand beside her at the window. Their reflections overlapped in the glass, her in champagne silk, him in his white dress shirt with the sleeves now rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that suggested he didn't rely entirely on others for enforcement. "I grew up with nothing," he said finally. "My mother cleaned houses. My father was gone before I could remember him. We lived in a studio apartment in Queens where the heat barely worked and the landlord ignored every complaint." Vivian stayed quiet, sensing he needed to tell this at his own pace. "I was 14 when someone tried to hurt my mother," Damien continued. "A man she worked for. He thought she was vulnerable, that no one would believe her or care what happened to her." His jaw tightened. "I put him in the hospital, nearly killed him. Would have if my mother hadn't stopped me." "What happened to you?" "I should have gone to juvenile detention. But the man's employer, someone with actual power in the neighborhood, saw what I'd done and made me an offer. Work for him instead of rotting in the system. Learn how to channel that violence into something useful." "You took the offer." "I was 14, angry and desperate to protect my mother. Yes, I took it." He glanced at her. "I learned fast. Learned that fear is more useful than force, that information is power, that people will pay almost anything for the illusion of security." "And your mother?" Something painful crossed his face. "She died 6 years ago. Cancer. I'd made enough by then to afford the best doctors, the most advanced treatments. None of it mattered." Vivian's hand found his without thinking. "I'm sorry." "She was the only person who ever looked at me and saw something worth saving." Damien's fingers tightened around hers. "Everyone else saw a weapon or a threat or a tool. She saw her son." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in Vivian's chest. This dangerous man who controlled criminal operations and inspired fear. He was also someone who'd fought to protect his mother, who'd built an empire partly to give her the comfort she'd never had. "Is that why you helped me tonight?" she asked. "Because I grabbed your arm and looked desperate?" "Partly." He turned to face her fully. "But also because you looked fierce even while you were terrified. Like you'd rather burn the whole building down than let anyone see you broken. I wasn't that brave. You walked into your ex's wedding wearing a dress that cost more than you could afford, planning to face everyone with your head high. You gambled everything on a stranger rather than admit defeat." His free hand came up to cup her face. "That's not just brave, Vivian. That's extraordinary." She could barely breathe. No one had ever looked at her the way Damien did, like she was fascinating, valuable, worth the risk of honesty. "I'm not extraordinary," she whispered. "I'm a graphic designer who lives in a walk-up in Brooklyn and can barely afford my student loans. I'm completely, utterly ordinary." "Then why can't I stop thinking about you?" His thumb brushed her lower lip. "Why did watching you walk into that ballroom feel like watching lightning strike? Why does every instinct I have say that letting you walk away would be the biggest mistake of my life?" "Damien," he kissed her before she could finish. Not the fierce, claiming kiss from the bathroom, but something slower, deeper, more deliberate. Like he was learning the shape of her mouth, memorizing the taste of her, taking his time because he had no intention of rushing. Vivian melted into him. Her wine glass landed on a nearby table. She wasn't sure when she set it down, and her hand slid up his chest to loop around his neck. He was solid and warm, one arm banding around her waist, while the other cradled her head with surprising gentleness. When they finally broke apart, Vivian's heart was hammering and her carefully constructed defenses lay in ruins. "Stay," Damien said against her lips. "Not for anything except being together. I just want more time before reality crashes back in." She should say no. Should call a car and go home to her safe, ordinary life where men didn't confess to criminal empires or kiss her like she was oxygen. "Okay," Vivian heard herself say. "I'll stay." Relief flickered across his face, followed quickly by something warmer and more complicated. He took her hand and led her deeper into the brownstone, past the living room to a kitchen that was all clean lines and professional-grade appliances. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I'm assuming you didn't eat much at the reception." Vivian's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. She'd been too nervous to eat more than a few bites of salmon. "Starving, actually." "I can work with that." Damien opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients with practiced efficiency. "Any allergies or strong preferences?" "No allergies. I'll eat almost anything." She watched him work, fascinated by the transformation. The dangerous criminal who commanded empires moved around the kitchen with easy competence, chopping vegetables, heating olive oil, moving between tasks with the efficiency of someone who actually cooked rather than just ordering in. "You're good at this," she observed. "My mother taught me. She said men who couldn't feed themselves were pathetic." He smiled slightly at the memory. "She made sure I knew my way around a kitchen before she'd let me leave home." "How old were you when you left?" 17. I'd saved enough to move her somewhere better, and I needed space to build what I was creating without her seeing too much of it. He sliced garlic with knife skills that made Vivian nervous. She knew what I did, generally, but I tried to shield her from the details. "Did it work?" "No. Mothers always know." He added the garlic to sizzling oil, and the kitchen filled with rich aroma. She worried constantly, but she also understood why I'd made the choices I made. Vivian hopped up to sit on the counter, watching him cook. It felt surreal. A few hours ago, she'd been preparing to survive her ex's wedding, and now she was sitting in a criminal's kitchen watching him make pasta like a completely normal person. "What are you thinking?" Damien asked, glancing at her. "That this might be the strangest night of my life." "Good strange or bad strange?" "I'm not sure yet." She tilted her head. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone colder, maybe. More obviously dangerous. Not someone who cooks and talks about his mother and has good taste in art." "Dangerous people aren't always obvious about it." He added pasta to boiling water. "The ones who advertise their violence are usually compensating for weakness. Real power is quiet." "Is that what you are? Quiet power?" "I prefer to think of myself as strategic." He stirred the pasta with casual expertise. Though people who've crossed me would probably use different words. Like what? Merciless, unforgiving, thorough. He met her eyes. I don't make idle threats, and I don't leave loose ends. A shiver ran down Vivian's spine, not entirely from fear. There was something darkly compelling about his absolute certainty, the confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. Should I be scared of you? She asked quietly. Damien turned off the burners and moved to stand in front of her, his hands resting on the counter on either side of her hips, caging her in without actually touching her. Of what I do to my enemies? Yes, of what I do to you. His eyes searched hers. Never. You could take everything I've told you tonight, go to the police, burn my entire operation to the ground, and the worst thing I'd do is disappear before they could catch me. You wouldn't retaliate. Not against you. His voice was absolute. Whatever this is between us, it exists outside my business, outside the rules I normally operate by. Vivian reached out and placed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her hand. Why? Because I've spent 15 years building an empire on fear and leverage and calculated risk, and you walked into my life by complete accident and made me want something different. He covered her hand with his. I don't know what to do with that except follow it and see where it goes. The pasta timer went off, breaking the intensity of the moment. Damien stepped back and returned to cooking, draining pasta, mixing it with the garlic and oil and vegetables he'd prepared, adding fresh herbs and parmesan. 5 minutes later, they sat at his dining table with simple plates of pasta that tasted better than anything Vivian had eaten in months. This is incredible, she said, around a mouthful. It's just aglio e olio. I don't care what it's called. It's amazing. She twirled more pasta onto her fork. Do you cook often? A few times a week. It's meditative, gives me time to think without phones or meetings or people needing decisions. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Vivian tried to reconcile all the different versions of Damien she'd encountered tonight. The smooth charmer at the wedding, the dangerous criminal in confession, the skilled cook who talked about his mother with genuine love. Tell me about your work, he said eventually. Graphic design, you said? Nothing as exciting as international crime. But she found herself talking anyway, about the small agency where she worked, the clients who changed their minds constantly, the satisfaction of seeing a design come together perfectly. It's not glamorous, but I like solving visual problems, making things beautiful and functional at the same time. That's not so different from what I do, except I don't threaten anyone. Persuasion takes many forms. He refilled their wine glasses. You persuade through aesthetics. I persuade through incentives. Both require understanding what motivates people. That's a very generous comparison. I'm serious. You read a client's needs and translate them into visuals that achieve their goals. I read a situation and engineer an outcome that serves my interests. The principles are the same. Vivian had never thought about her work that way. So you're saying I'm a criminal, just with better PR? Damien laughed, a genuine surprise sound that transformed his entire face. Not even remotely, but you're strategic, you understand leverage. Those are skills most people never develop. They talked through the rest of dinner and into a second bottle of wine. Damien asked questions like he actually cared about the answers. About her childhood in Pennsylvania, her decision to move to New York, the friends who'd slowly drifted away when Adrian left because they'd been his friends first. In return, he shared carefully edited pieces of his life. The neighborhoods he controlled, though not the specifics of how. The legitimate businesses he used as cover. The investments he'd made in art and property, because beauty mattered even in a brutal profession. Do you ever want out? Vivian asked as they moved back to the living room carrying their wine. Want to walk away from all of it? Sometimes. Usually around 3 in the morning when I can't sleep because I'm calculating how many ways a deal could go wrong. He settled onto the sofa, and Vivian curled up beside him without thinking about it. But then I remember what it was like being 14 and powerless, watching my mother work herself to exhaustion for barely enough to survive. And I think about how many people depend on the stability I provide. Stability through crime. Stability through structure. The neighborhoods I control have rules, protection, systems that work because everyone knows the consequences of breaking them. He absently played with a strand of her hair that had escaped its pins. I'm not a hero, but I'm not chaos either. Vivian leaned her head against his shoulder, the wine and emotional exhaustion of the evening catching up with her. This is so far outside my normal life. Mine too, honestly. His arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer. I don't bring people here. I don't confess criminal activity over homemade pasta. I definitely don't sit on my sofa feeling like a teenager trying to figure out when it's acceptable to kiss someone again. That made Vivian smile. You're feeling that too? Constantly. His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder, which is inconvenient because you deserve better than someone who exists in permanent legal gray area. Maybe I get to decide what I deserve. Maybe. He tilted her face up toward his. But I'm going to give you an out anyway, because that's what you do when you actually care about someone instead of just wanting to possess them. An out? Tomorrow morning, I'll have my driver take you home. We'll exchange numbers, and you can decide if you want to see me again or if tonight was enough adventure for a lifetime. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. No pressure, no expectations. Just the choice to walk away clean if that's what you need. Vivian's heart twisted. He was offering her exactly what Adrian never had, the freedom to choose without manipulation or guilt. And if I don't want to walk away, she asked, then I'll take you to dinner somewhere that doesn't involve fake engagements or ex-boyfriends. Somewhere we can figure out if this works outside crisis situations. That sounds terrifying. Why? Because tonight I had an excuse. I was desperate and you were convenient and none of it had to be real. She swallowed hard. But a real date means admitting I'm actually interested in a man I barely know. A man who scares me and fascinates me in equal measure. I scare you? Completely. Not because I think you'll hurt me, she added quickly, but because you make me want to throw away every safe choice I've ever made and just see what happens. Damien's eyes darkened. And that's frightening? I've spent my whole life being responsible, following rules, making sensible decisions. Vivian set down her wine glass with deliberate care. Adrian left because I wasn't exciting enough, wasn't ambitious enough, didn't fit into the life he wanted. Adrian left because he's an idiot who wouldn't recognize an extraordinary woman if she grabbed his arm in a hotel lobby. I grabbed your arm. Exactly. He shifted closer, his hand sliding into her hair, dislodging more pins. And it's the best thing that's happened to me in years. Vivian's breath caught. You can't possibly mean that. Why not? Because you don't know me. Not really. You know I have terrible judgment and questionable crisis management skills and a vindictive streak that made me hire a fake fiancé. I know you're brave and resourceful and beautiful enough to stop my heart when you walked into that ballroom. His forehead touched hers. I know you kiss like you mean it and ask hard questions and don't settle for comfortable lies. That's more than most people reveal in months. Damien, say yes to dinner, he interrupted. Say yes to finding out if this chemistry works when we're not performing for an audience. Say yes to giving me a chance to prove I can be someone you'd choose deliberately, not just desperately. The request hung between them, weighted with possibility and risk and the terrifying potential of something real. Vivian thought about her ordinary life. Her small apartment and predictable job and careful routines designed to avoid exactly this kind of chaos. She thought about Adrian's wedding, the humiliation she'd felt, the determination to prove she'd moved on. But sitting here with Damien, wrapped in his warmth and the undeniable connection sparking between them, all those safe choices felt suffocating. Okay, she whispered. Yes to dinner. His smile was brilliant and triumphant, and surprisingly vulnerable all at once. Saturday night. I'll pick you up at 7. That's very specific for someone who just offered to let me walk away. I'm an optimist when it matters. He kissed her softly, sweetly, nothing like the desperate heat from earlier. This was promise and patience and the kind of care that made Vivian's chest ache. When he pulled back, his eyes held hers with unusual intensity. I need to tell you something else. Before Saturday. Before this goes any further. Vivian's stomach dropped. What? People watch me, constantly. Law enforcement, rival operations, people who'd love to find leverage they could use against me. His jaw tightened. If we do this, if you choose to see where this goes, You'll be seen with me. Photographed, probably. Investigated, possibly. Your life will become less private. You're saying dating you comes with surveillance? I'm saying I come with complications that most people would find unacceptable. And you deserve to know that before you agree to anything. It should have been the final warning, the thing that made her thank him for an interesting evening and return to her safe, invisible life. But Vivian had spent years being invisible. Being the girlfriend who didn't quite fit, the designer who blended into the background, the woman people barely noticed. The idea of being seen, really seen, as someone valuable enough to watch, felt less like a threat and more like validation. I'll risk it, she said. Damien studied her face like he was memorizing every detail. You're sure? No, I'm terrified, but I'm also tired of being safe and invisible and careful. She cupped his face in both hands. So yes, I'm sure. He kissed her again, and this time neither of them held back. The careful gentleness dissolved into heat and hunger, hands tangling in hair and fabric, bodies pressing close with desperate need. Vivian ended up in his lap somehow, her champagne dress riding up her thighs, his hands spanning her waist with possessive certainty. She could feel his heartbeat racing against hers, could taste wine and want, and the intoxicating promise of something dangerous and real. Vivian, he managed against her mouth, his voice rough. If we don't stop now, I won't want to stop at all. Maybe I don't want you to stop. His hands tightened on her waist. You're not thinking clearly. Tonight has been intense, and the wine, don't. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Don't make my choices for me. Don't decide I'm too drunk or too emotional to know what I want. I'm trying to be decent. I don't need decent. I need honest. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. Tell me the truth. Do you want me? Yes. The word was ground out like a confession. So much it's taking every ounce of control I have not to carry you upstairs right now. Then why don't you? Because tomorrow morning, I want you to remember choosing this, not regret it as a mistake made in a vulnerable moment. The consideration in his voice cracked something open inside Vivian. Adrian had never worried about her regrets, had never paused to make sure she was certain. He'd taken what he wanted and expected her gratitude for his attention. Damien was offering something entirely different. Respect, patience, the space to choose freely. It made her want him even more. I won't regret it, she said firmly. The only thing I'll regret is if I walk away without knowing what this could be. His eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then he stood in one smooth movement, lifting her with him, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist. Upstairs, he said. Last chance to change your mind. Not changing it. He carried her through the brownstone to a staircase she hadn't noticed earlier, his strength effortless, his hands steady beneath her thighs. Vivian pressed kisses to his neck, his jaw, anywhere she could reach, tasting salt and cologne and the heady knowledge that this powerful, dangerous man wanted her enough to shake with the effort of restraint. His bedroom was all dark wood and clean lines, dominated by a massive bed with sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But Vivian barely registered the details before Damien set her down and kissed her with renewed intensity. They undressed each other slowly, reverently, between kisses and whispered words. The champagne dress pooled at her feet. His shirt landed somewhere forgotten. Every barrier removed felt like peeling away pretense, revealing something raw and true beneath. When they finally came together, skin to skin, Vivian felt the world narrow to just this, his hands learning her body, her name on his lips like a prayer, the overwhelming sensation of being completely, thoroughly wanted. Hours later, she lay wrapped in expensive sheets with Damien's arm around her waist, his breathing deep and even with sleep. City lights filtered through the windows, painting everything in soft gold. Vivian should have felt guilty or uncertain or afraid, should have been cataloging all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Instead, she felt safe, seen, more herself than she'd been in years. She had walked into her ex's wedding planning to fake her way through one evening, but somewhere between a desperate grab in a hotel lobby and this quiet moment in a stranger's bed, everything had changed. Damien Moretti was dangerous and criminal and completely wrong for her on every practical level, and Vivian couldn't wait to see him again. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting realization that Vivian had no idea what time it was. She blinked awake slowly, her body warm and pleasantly sore, wrapped in sheets that felt like they cost more than her entire bed back home. Damien's side of the bed was empty but still warm. She could hear water running somewhere, a shower probably, and smell coffee brewing from downstairs. Reality crashed in with uncomfortable clarity. She'd slept with a man she barely knew, a criminal, someone who'd confessed to violence and illegal operations and God knew what else. She should be horrified, ashamed, already planning her escape. Instead, she felt oddly peaceful. The shower stopped. A few minutes later, Damien emerged from the bathroom wearing dark slacks and a white shirt, his hair still damp, looking unfairly attractive for someone who'd gotten as little sleep as she had. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "I was starting to think you'd sleep until noon. What time is it?" "Almost 10. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hand finding hers beneath the covers. "How are you feeling?" Vivian considered lying, then remembered his request for honesty. "Confused, a little overwhelmed, but not sorry." Relief flickered across his face. "Good, because I'm not sorry either, and it would be awkward if we had different opinions on that." She laughed despite herself. "Very awkward. There's coffee downstairs, and I can make breakfast, or we can order something, or—" He stopped, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've never done this before." "Had someone stay over?" "Had someone I actually wanted to stay." His thumb traced circles against her palm. "My usual approach is much simpler. But with you, I want to get it right." The vulnerability in his admission made Vivian's heart twist. This dangerous man who commanded criminal operations was worried about breakfast protocols. "Coffee sounds perfect," she said. "And maybe you could lend me something to wear? I don't think the champagne dress is appropriate for Sunday morning." 20 minutes later, she was showered and dressed in one of Damien's shirts that hung to mid-thigh, her hair still damp, her makeup from the night before cleaned away. She looked completely different from the polished woman who'd walked into that wedding, softer, younger, more herself. Damien's eyes tracked over her as she entered the kitchen, and the heat in his gaze made her skin prickle with awareness. "That's dangerous," he said. "What is?" "You. In my shirt. Looking like you belong here." He poured her coffee with steady hands that didn't match the intensity in his voice. "It makes me want things I shouldn't." "Like what?" "Like keeping you here all day? Forgetting I have meetings and responsibilities, pretending the rest of the world doesn't exist." He handed her the mug. "See? Dangerous." Vivian accepted the coffee, inhaling the rich aroma. "You have meetings on Sunday?" "My work doesn't respect weekends." He leaned against the counter, watching her with the focused attention that made her feel like the only person in the universe. "But I can reschedule, if you want to stay." She should say no. Should go home to her apartment and her normal life, and give herself space to process everything that had happened. But the idea of leaving this warm kitchen and returning to reality felt unbearable. "I should at least let my roommate know I'm alive," she said. "She's probably worried." "Your phone's on the counter. It's been charging." Vivian found her phone where he'd indicated, the screen showing a dozen missed calls and twice as many texts. Most were from her roommate, Sarah, progressing from curious to concerned to mildly panicked. She typed out a quick message. "I'm fine. Something unexpected happened. We'll explain later." "Don't worry." Sarah's response came immediately. "Unexpected like good? Or unexpected like I need to call the police?" "Good. Definitely good. Details required immediately. Later. Promise." Vivian set down the phone and found Damien watching her with amusement. "Roommate crisis averted?" he asked. "For now, though she's going to have a lot of questions when I get home." "What will you tell her?" "I have no idea." Vivian took a long sip of coffee. "Hey, Sarah, remember how I was going to Adrian's wedding with a hired escort? Well, I grabbed the wrong guy, he turned out to be a crime boss, and now I'm drinking coffee in his kitchen wearing his shirt. Totally normal Sunday." Damien laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "When you put it that way, it does sound insane." "Because it is insane." "Maybe, but sometimes the best things are." He moved closer, setting his own coffee aside. "I meant what I said last night, about giving you an out. My driver can take you home whenever you want. No pressure." Vivian studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas, but all she saw was sincerity and barely concealed hope that she'd choose to stay. "What would we do?" she asked. "If I stayed?" "Whatever you want. I could give you a tour of the neighborhood. We could go to the farmer's market down the street, or we could stay here and talk and figure out if last night was lightning in a bottle or something that could actually work." The casual domesticity of his suggestions felt more intimate than anything they'd done in his bedroom. Going to a farmer's market together, walking through his neighborhood like a normal couple, it would make this real in a way that scared and thrilled her simultaneously. Farmer's market, Vivian decided, but I need real clothes first. "I can have someone bring you options. What size?" She blinked. "You can just have someone bring me clothes?" "I know people who owe me favors, including a boutique owner who won't ask questions and has excellent taste." He was already pulling out his phone. "Size?" "6, usually, but Damien, you don't have to." "I want to." He looked up from his phone. "Let me do this, please." There was something in his voice that made Vivian understand this wasn't about showing off or proving his resources. It was about taking care of her, making sure she felt comfortable, removing obstacles that might push her away. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." He made a quick call in Italian. Vivian caught maybe one word in 10 and hung up with a satisfied expression. "Done. Someone will be here in 45 minutes. That's terrifyingly efficient. I've built my entire operation on efficiency." He reclaimed his coffee. Among other things, they migrated to the living room, settling onto the sofa in a comfortable tangle of limbs. Vivian tucked her feet beneath her, leaning into Damien's warmth, feeling more relaxed than she had any right to be given the circumstances. "Tell me about your week," he said. "Before the wedding. What was your life like?" "Boring compared to yours." "I doubt that." So Vivian told him about the impossible client who kept changing his mind about color schemes, the coffee shop near her apartment where the barista knew her order, the friend group that had slowly dissolved after Adrian left, the quiet evenings alone in her apartment, working on freelance projects and trying to convince herself she was happy. Damien listened with the same intense focus he brought to everything, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention, not just waiting for his turn to talk. "You sound lonely," he observed. "I am lonely." The admission came easier than expected. "I thought I'd adjusted after Adrian, thought I was fine being alone, but I was really just avoiding the risk of being hurt again. And now? Now I'm sitting in a crime boss's living room wearing his shirt and seriously considering whether I'm ready to risk everything for someone I met yesterday." She shook her head. "So clearly my self-preservation instincts are broken. Or maybe they're working perfectly." His hand found hers again, that constant need for physical connection that made her feel anchored. Maybe they recognized that some risks are worth taking. Before Vivian could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and stood with fluid grace. "I need to take this," he said. "It's important. I'll be quick." He disappeared into another room, his voice dropping to a low murmur. Vivian couldn't hear the words, but she caught the tone, authoritative, cold, nothing like the warmth he showed her. It was a reminder that the man making her coffee and offering farmers' market trips was the same man who controlled criminal operations and inspired fear in people whose names she'd never know. She should have been terrified by that duality. Instead, she found it fascinating. Damien returned 5 minutes later, his expression carefully neutral. "Sorry about that. Everything okay? Just business, nothing that affects you." But there was tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Damien!" Vivian stood, moving to face him. "If we're going to try this, whatever this is, you can't hide the difficult parts. I know what you do. You told me. Don't start pretending it's all coffee and farmers' markets." He studied her for a long moment. "One of my operations is being investigated. Federal agents asking questions, pushing informants. It's manageable, but it requires attention. Is it dangerous? Potentially, if they find enough evidence to move forward with charges." His jaw tightened. "Which is why I gave you the out. Why I keep offering you the chance to walk away before you're too entangled." "What if I don't want to walk away?" "Then you accept that my life includes phone calls I can't explain fully, meetings I can't bring you to, Risks that might eventually touch you just by association. He cupped her face in both hands. I won't lie to you, Vivian, but I also can't give you complete transparency. Some things are dangerous to know. It should have been the breaking point, the moment when common sense overrode attraction and she ran for the safety of her ordinary life. But Vivian had spent years being safe and invisible, and standing here with Damien's hands on her face, seeing the careful balance between honesty and protection in his eyes, she realized she'd rather have complicated truth than comfortable lies. I can live with that, she said, as long as you don't shut me out completely. Relief flooded his expression. He kissed her softly, reverently, like she'd just given him something precious and unexpected. The doorbell interrupted them. Damien released her with obvious reluctance and went to answer it, returning with several garment bags that he laid across the sofa. The boutique owner sends her regards and says you have excellent taste in men, he reported with slight amusement. Vivian unzipped the first bag and found a selection of casual clothes, jeans, sweaters, a leather jacket that looked butter-soft and probably cost a fortune. Everything was her size, her style, chosen by someone who actually understood fashion. This is too much, she protested. It's barely anything. Try them on and keep whatever you like. Donate the rest if you want. She selected dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, disappearing to change. When she returned, Damien's eyes darkened with appreciation. Better than the champagne dress, he said. Though I did love that dress. Liar. You loved taking it off. That too. He shrugged into a jacket. Ready to face the world as my official Sunday companion? They left the brownstone together, stepping into a crisp autumn morning that smelled like coffee and fallen leaves. The neighborhood was quiet, elegant, the kind of area where people had money but didn't advertise it loudly. Damien took her hand as they walked, his fingers lacing through hers with easy familiarity. To anyone watching, they looked like a normal couple enjoying a Sunday stroll. No one would guess his profession or the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. The farmers' market occupied several blocks, vendors selling everything from organic produce to artisan bread to handmade jewelry. Damien moved through it with surprising ease, greeting a few vendors by name, selecting vegetables with the same care he'd shown cooking the night before. You actually shop here? Vivian asked, watching him examine heirloom tomatoes with professional scrutiny. Every Sunday I'm in town. He added several to his bag. The woman who runs the organic stand makes incredible basil. And the bread guy? His sourdough is better than most restaurants. It was such a normal activity, grocery shopping at a farmer's market, that Vivian almost forgot who she was with. Until she noticed the way some vendors' eyes lingered on Damien with recognition and carefully maintained respect. They knew him, knew what he did, and chose to treat him with the same courtesy they showed every customer. They're not afraid of you, she observed quietly. These people? No, I make sure the market stays safe. Make sure vendors don't get harassed by protection rackets or pushed out by developers. His expression was matter-of-fact. They provide a service to the community. I make sure they can keep doing it. So you're like a criminal Robin Hood? More like enlightened self-interest. Happy vendors mean stable neighborhood. Stable neighborhood means better property values and fewer problems that draw attention. He paused. But I also genuinely like the bread guy's sourdough, so there's that. Vivian laughed despite herself. He was impossible, dangerous and domestic, criminal and surprisingly principled, completely wrong for her and somehow exactly right at the same time. They finished shopping and walked back to the brownstone, their bags full of fresh produce and bread that smelled incredible. Damien's hand never left hers except to carry bags, maintaining that constant physical connection that made Vivian feel claimed in a way she'd never experienced. Back at the brownstone, they unpacked groceries together. Damien moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, putting things away, already planning meals. Stay for lunch, he said. It wasn't quite a question. I should probably go home eventually. Sarah's going to hunt me down if I don't appear soon. Tonight, then. Let me take you to dinner, a real date, not a wedding performance. Vivian's heart stuttered. This was the moment when the fantasy collided with reality, when they stopped being two people playing pretend and became something that required actual decisions. Where, she asked. There's a restaurant in Soho, small, quiet, exceptional food. No one will bother us there. His eyes held hers. I want to take you somewhere I don't bring anyone else. Somewhere that becomes ours. The possessiveness in his words should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her stomach. "Okay," Vivian said. "Tonight. 7? I'll pick you up at 6:30. Wear something that makes you feel beautiful." He crossed to her, pulling her close. "Though you could show up in a paper bag and still be the most stunning woman I've ever seen." Flatterer. Truth teller. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until her knees felt weak. "Now go home before I convince you to stay forever." His driver appeared with perfect timing, and Vivian found herself back in the sleek black car, heading toward her Brooklyn apartment with bags of designer clothes and a head full of confused emotions. Sarah practically tackled her the moment she walked through the door. "Explain. Everything. Now." Her roommate dragged her to the sofa with wild eyes. "You've been gone since yesterday afternoon. Your phone was dead. I was this close to filing a missing person report." Vivian took a breath and told her. Not everything, she carefully edited out the criminal empire parts, but enough. The wrong man in the lobby, the chemistry at the wedding, leaving together, spending the night at his place. "You slept with a stranger?" Sarah's eyes were huge. "You?" Vivian Cross, who wouldn't even kiss a guy until the third date. "I know. It's not like me." That's the understatement of the century. Sarah studied her face carefully. "But you look happy. Really happy. I haven't seen you look like this since before Adrian." "I am happy, and terrified, and completely out of my depth." "What's his name?" "Damian Moretti." Sarah pulled out her phone immediately, fingers flying across the screen. "Let's see what Google says about your mystery man." "Sarah, don't—" But it was too late. Sarah's expression shifted from curious to shocked as she read whatever came up. "Vivian, holy shit, Damian Moretti?" She turned the phone screen. "There's like a dozen articles here. Suspected organized crime connections, federal investigations. The FBI thinks he runs half the import operations in the Northeast." Vivian's stomach dropped. "What?" "Look." Sarah scrolled through result. "The government's been trying to build a case against him for years, but nothing sticks. He's too careful, too well protected." She looked up, her face pale. "This is who you spent the night with?" "He told me," Vivian said quickly, "about his work. He was honest from the beginning." "Honest about being a criminal?" "Honest about operating outside traditional law. About the risks that come with being involved with him." Vivian took back her phone, scanning the articles with growing unease. None of them had concrete proof, just speculation, unnamed sources, investigations that went nowhere. "He gave me the chance to walk away." "And you didn't?" "No." "Vivian, this is insane. This man is dangerous. The FBI is investigating him. You could get caught up in something terrible. Or I could experience something extraordinary." Vivian met her roommate's worried gaze. "Sarah, I know this looks crazy from the outside, but he makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. And after watching Adrian marry someone else, after spending months invisible and irrelevant, I'm not ready to give that up because it's risky." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "You're really going to do this?" "I think I am." "Then I'm going to worry constantly, and you're going to text me every time you're with him, so I know you're safe. And if anything even slightly suspicious happens, you're out. Deal?" Vivian hugged her friend tightly. "Deal." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of nervous preparation. Vivian tried on half her wardrobe before settling on a simple black dress that made her feel elegant without trying too hard. She redid her makeup 3 times, her hands shaking with anticipation. At 6:30 precisely, her phone buzzed with a text from Damian. "I'm outside." She grabbed her purse and headed downstairs, finding the now familiar black car waiting at the curb. But this time, Damian stepped out to open the door himself, looking devastating in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You look incredible," he said, his eyes tracking over her with undisguised appreciation. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He helped her into the car with old-fashioned courtesy, then slid in beside her. The driver pulled away smoothly, heading back toward Manhattan. "Nervous?" Damian asked. "Completely. Sarah found articles about you. FBI investigations. Organized crime allegations." His expression tightened. "And?" "And I'm still here." Vivian took his hand. She thinks I'm insane. She's probably right. Maybe. But I'd rather be crazy with you than sensible alone. Something bright and fierce flashed in his eyes. He pulled her close, kissing her with barely restrained intensity, his hand tangling in her carefully styled hair. You're going to ruin my lipstick, she managed against his mouth. I'll buy you new lipstick. That's not how lipstick works. Then I'll hire someone to reapply it. I don't care. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. I'm just glad you're here. The restaurant was exactly as he'd described. Small, intimate, tucked into a Soho side street with no sign announcing its presence. Inside, soft lighting and exposed brick created an atmosphere of elegant privacy. The host greeted Damien by name and led them to a corner table that felt deliberately secluded. No one sat nearby. No one could easily see them. It was perfect for a conversation that needed privacy. They ordered wine and appetizers. Damien asked about her day, her work, the projects she was excited about. He listened like every word mattered, asking follow-up questions that showed genuine interest. Tell me about your first design job, he said, over perfectly cooked scallops. What made you fall in love with it? So Vivian told him about the small agency that had hired her fresh out of college, the creative director who'd believed in her vision, the first time she'd seen her design on an actual billboard and felt like she'd accomplished something real. I was so proud, she admitted. It wasn't a huge campaign, just a local business trying to rebrand. But I'd made something beautiful and functional, and it existed in the world because of choices I'd made. You light up when you talk about your work, Damien observed. It's beautiful to watch. What about you? Do you love what you do? He considered the question carefully. Love is complicated. I respect what I've built. Take pride in the efficiency of my operations, the loyalty I've earned. But love? He shook his head slightly. It's more like mastery. I'm exceptional at what I do, and there's satisfaction in that. But if you could do anything else without consequences, I'd probably invest in art, buy pieces from emerging artists, help them get gallery shows, create a foundation that supports creativity. He smiled at her surprise. What? You think criminals can't appreciate beauty? I think you're full of contradictions. Most interesting people are. Their main courses arrived. Lamb for him, sea bass for her, both prepared with the kind of skill that made conversation pause in favor of appreciation. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the intimacy of sharing a meal together more powerful than Vivian had expected. I need to tell you something, Damien said eventually, his tone shifting to something more serious. About the investigation Sarah found. Vivian set down her fork, giving him her full attention. It's real. The FBI has been building a case for 2 years. They have surveillance, informants, financial records they think prove illegal activity. His jaw tightened. So far, nothing has been concrete enough to charge me, but they're persistent. How much danger are you in? Legally? Minimal if I stay careful, but investigations create pressure, make people nervous. Nervous people make mistakes or betray confidences. He met her eyes directly, which means the next few months could get complicated. Complicated how? More scrutiny, potential arrests of people in my organization, pressure from rivals who smell weakness. His hand found hers across the table. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know what you're walking into. If you want out, now is the time. Before things get messier. Vivian thought about the easy path. Thank him for an interesting weekend, go back to her safe life. Find someone uncomplicated and legal and boring. Then she thought about the way he looked at her, the honesty he offered when lies would be easier, the care he took to give her choices instead of manipulating her into compliance. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly. Relief and something deeper, gratitude maybe, or wonder, crossed his face. You're sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a promise. Then I'll do everything I can to keep you safe from the fallout. I don't need you to protect me from your life. I need you to trust me to handle it. Vivian, I'm not fragile, Damien. I'm not some delicate thing that needs shielding from reality. She squeezed his hand. I chose this. Let me choose it fully. Something shifted in his expression. Respect mixing with desire, and the kind of fierce possession that should have scared her, but instead made her feel valued. You're extraordinary. he said quietly. Do you know that? You keep saying it. Maybe eventually I'll believe you. I'll keep saying it until you do. They finished dinner over shared dessert and easy conversation. Damien paid with a black card that had no visible credit limit, then helped her into her coat with the courtly manners that felt natural on him. Outside, the city hummed with Sunday evening energy. Damien pulled her close as they walked to the car, his arm around her shoulders, claiming her in a way that made passers-by notice. Vivian should have felt self-conscious. Instead, she felt proud. The drive back to Brooklyn was quiet, comfortable, Vivian's head resting on Damien's shoulder while the city lights blurred past. She felt the weekend ending, reality preparing to crash back in with Monday morning, and work, and all the complications they'd been avoiding. I don't want tonight to end, she admitted quietly. It doesn't have to. Come home with me. I have work tomorrow. Early meeting with a client. I'll have you back in Brooklyn by 7. You'll have plenty of time. His arm tightened around her. Please. I'm not ready to let you go yet. Neither was she. So when the driver asked for directions, Vivian gave him Damien's address instead of her own. They spent the night tangled together, learning each other's bodies with the kind of thorough attention that left them both breathless and satisfied. But it was the quiet moments between that Vivian treasured most. The whispered conversations in the dark. The gentle touches that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with connection. What are you thinking? Damien asked near dawn, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. That 48 hours ago, I thought my biggest problem was surviving Adrian's wedding. Vivian turned to face him. Now I'm lying here with you, and that night feels like it happened to a different person. Regrets? None. Worries, yes. Questions, definitely, but no regrets. She traced the line of his jaw. What about you? I regret not seeing you first in that hotel lobby, not approaching you before you had to desperately grab a stranger. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. But everything after, no regrets whatsoever. Dawn light filtered through the windows, painting everything gold. Vivian should have felt exhausted. They'd barely slept. Instead, she felt energized, alive, ready to face whatever came next. True to his word, Damien had her back in Brooklyn by 7, kissing her thoroughly before the driver opened her door. Dinner tomorrow? He asked. I'll cook. Something better than hotel pasta. You're assuming I want to see you again so soon. I'm hoping desperately that you do. Vivian smiled. 7 o'clock. And Damien? Don't overcook the pasta. His laugh followed her into her building, warming her all the way up to her apartment where Sarah was already awake and waiting with pointed questions and coffee. But as Vivian recounted the weekend, carefully editing the most intimate details, she realized something had fundamentally shifted. She'd walked into Adrian's wedding broken and desperate, planning to fake her way through one evening. She'd walked out having found something real with the most unexpected person imaginable. And whatever came next, investigations, complications, the messy reality of building something with a man who lived outside conventional rules, Vivian was ready to face it, because for the first time in years, she felt like the protagonist of her own story, instead of a supporting character in someone else's. And that was worth any risk. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and carefully constructed normalcy. Vivian went to work, attended client meetings, maintained her regular routine. But every evening, Damien found ways to slip into her life. Dinners at quiet restaurants, late-night conversations that stretched until dawn, weekends that disappeared into the warmth of his brownstone. They built something fragile and precious between the cracks of his dangerous world and her ordinary one. Vivian learned to read his moods, to recognize when a tense phone call meant problems she couldn't ask about, when his silences meant he was calculating risks she'd never fully understand. In return, Damien learned her rhythms, the way she bit her lip when concentrating on a design, how she needed coffee before conversation in the morning, the small tells that revealed when something was bothering her. It should have felt unstable, this relationship built on secrets and half-truths. Instead, it felt more real than anything Vivian had experienced with Adrian's careful respectability. But reality had a way of crashing through even the most carefully constructed walls. It started with a man in a gray suit waiting outside her office building on a Tuesday afternoon. Vivian noticed him immediately. Too still, too focused, watching the entrance with professional patience that set off every instinct Damien had inadvertently taught her. She pulled out her phone, fingers shaking slightly as she typed, "Someone's watching my office. Gray suit, northeast corner." Damien's response came within seconds. "Don't approach. Walk to the coffee shop 2 blocks west. I'm sending Marcus." Marcus turned out to be the driver who'd become a familiar presence in Vivian's life over the past weeks. He appeared at the coffee shop within 10 minutes, his expression carefully neutral as he guided her to the waiting car. "What's happening?" Vivian asked once they were moving. "Mr. Moretti will explain. He asked me to bring you somewhere safe." The car didn't head to Damien's brownstone. Instead, Marcus drove to a building in Tribeca that looked like expensive condos but felt different, more secure, more deliberate. He escorted her through a lobby where the doorman clearly recognized him, up an elevator that required a keycard, to a penthouse that was all windows and minimalist design. Damien was waiting inside, phone pressed to his ear, his expression darker than Vivian had ever seen it. He ended the call the moment he saw her and crossed the space in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with fierce relief. "You're okay," he said against her hair. "I'm fine. Just confused." She pulled back to look at his face. "Who was that man?" "Federal agent. They're escalating surveillance, watching people connected to me." His jaw tightened. "I should have anticipated this. Should have been more careful about being seen with you publicly." "Damien, we've been careful. We had dinner at Maria last week. Walked through Central Park on Sunday. You stayed at my place 4 nights this week." He released her, pacing to the windows with controlled frustration. "Someone's been documenting it all, building a profile of you as leverage against me." The words hit like ice water. Leverage? They can't get to me directly, so they'll pressure everyone around me. Associates, business partners, anyone who might know something useful. He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was startling. "I never wanted you caught in this. You warned me. I chose to stay anyway. Knowing theoretically that you might be investigated is different from having federal agents actually following you." His hands clenched at his sides. "Vivian, they're going to dig into your life. Your finances, your friends, your work. They'll interview people you know, asking questions designed to make you look complicit." The full implications crashed over her. "My job. If my boss thinks I'm involved with organized crime, I know." The words were rough with guilt. "Which is why I'm giving you a choice, a real one, with full information." Vivian's stomach dropped. "What kind of choice?" "You can walk away. Completely. I'll make sure the surveillance stops, that nothing in my investigation touches you. We'll stop seeing each other, and in a few weeks the FBI will lose interest because you're no longer relevant. Or you stay with me and we face this together. But that means accepting that your privacy is compromised, that your life will be scrutinized, that people will judge you for choosing someone like me." He crossed back to her, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. "I want you to stay more than I've wanted anything in years, but I can't ask you to sacrifice your safety and reputation for a relationship that's barely a month old." Vivian's throat tightened. This was the moment she'd known was coming since that first night. The point where fantasy collided with consequence, where she had to decide what she was truly willing to risk. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to be selfish. Want to keep you regardless of the cost." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "But you deserve better than someone who operates in permanent moral gray area and brings federal investigations as relationship baggage." "That's not what I asked. I asked what you want, Damien. Not what you think I deserve or what's rational. What do you actually want?" His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened, the raw vulnerability there stole her breath. "I want forever with you," he said quietly. "Want to wake up next to you every morning and build something real outside the chaos of my work? Want to introduce you to the few people I trust and watch them fall in love with you the way I have." He stopped, seeming to realize what he'd just confessed. "I'm in love with you, Vivian, completely. Impossibly. And I have been since you grabbed my arm in that hotel lobby and gambled everything on a dangerous stranger." Vivian felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You love me?" "Desperately. Which is why I'm telling you to run while you still can." She laughed through the tears threatening to fall. "You're telling me you love me and asking me to leave in the same breath? I'm trying to do the right thing for once in my life." The right thing is letting me make my own choice. She took his hands, lacing their fingers together. I love you too. I've been terrified to admit it because it's too fast and too intense and completely insane. But I do. I love you. His breath caught. Vivian, I'm not walking away. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, the idea of FBI agents investigating me is terrifying. But losing you? That's worse. She squeezed his hands. So whatever comes next, we face it together. Damien kissed her with something close to desperation, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her against him like he was afraid she'd disappear. Vivian kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring every complicated emotion into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. You're sure? He asked, completely terrified and absolutely sure. She managed a shaky smile. Though I should probably call my boss and explain that I might become a person of interest in a federal investigation. You don't have to do that alone. I have lawyers, excellent ones, who can help navigate this. Damien, I can't afford lawyers who work for people like you. They're my gift, non-negotiable. His tone left no room for argument. If you're facing consequences because of me, I'm making sure you have the best possible defense. It should have felt wrong, accepting help from resources built on criminal enterprise. But Vivian was learning that morality in Damien's world existed in shades of gray she'd never had to navigate before. Okay, she agreed. Thank you. Sit. They spent the rest of the evening in the Tribeca penthouse, apparently a safe house Damien kept for emergencies. He made calls while Vivian tried to process the new reality of her life. Federal surveillance, background investigations, the very real possibility that her carefully constructed career could implode because she'd fallen in love with the wrong man. But watching Damien work, seeing the way he commanded loyalty and respect, even through phone conversations, the strategic mind that had built an empire from nothing, Vivian couldn't bring herself to regret choosing him. I need to tell you something else, Damien said after ending his 5th call. About the investigation. Vivian looked up from where she'd been absently scrolling through her phone. What? They're not just building a case against me, they're targeting my entire network. People who've worked with me for years, who depend on the stability I provide. His expression was grim. Some of them are getting scared. Scared people make unpredictable choices. You think someone might betray you? I think the pressure is designed to force exactly that. He sat beside her on the sofa, exhaustion visible in the lines around his eyes. The FBI is offering deals to anyone willing to testify. Immunity, witness protection, money to start over somewhere new. Would anyone take it? Probably. Loyalty has limits when facing 20 years in federal prison. He took her hand. Which means the next few months are going to be volatile. People being arrested, operations shutting down, constant uncertainty about who can be trusted. Vivian absorbed the implications. And you're telling me this because? Because you need to know what you're staying for. This isn't just inconvenient surveillance. It's potentially watching my entire empire collapse while I try to stay out of prison. His grip tightened on her hand. I'm not exaggerating the risk, Vivian. If they build a strong enough case, I could be indicted, and anyone close to me becomes a target for prosecution as an accessory. The fear that shot through her was sharp and immediate. They could charge me? If they believed you were knowingly participating in illegal activity, which is why I keep detailed separation between my personal life and business operations. His eyes held hers. You've never asked about specifics, never been present during business discussions, never accepted money or gifts that could be traced to criminal proceeds. The clothes from that first weekend, bought through legitimate funds from my legal businesses. Same with dinners, the car service, everything I've given you. It's all clean. He cupped her face. I've been protecting you from the beginning, Vivian, making sure that even if everything falls apart, you can walk away untouched. She should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt the sting of exclusion, like he'd been planning her exit since the moment they met. Don't look at me like that, Damien said quietly. I wasn't planning to lose you. I was planning to keep you safe. By building walls between us? By making sure your love for me couldn't be used to destroy you. He kissed her softly. There's a difference. Before Vivian could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and swore quietly. What? One of my warehouses was just raided. Federal agents, search warrants, the entire operation. He was already standing, reaching for his jacket. I need to go. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. This is exactly the kind of situation where you need distance. He kissed her forehead. Marcus will take you home. I'll call when I can. Damien, please, Vivian, let me protect you in the ways I can. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle whatever came. But the tension in his shoulders and the worry in his eyes made her swallow her protests. Be careful, she said instead. Always. One more kiss, fierce and quick, and then he was gone. Marcus drove Vivian back to Brooklyn in tense silence. She watched the city blur past, her mind racing with everything Damien had revealed. Federal raids, potential indictments, an empire crumbling while she stood helplessly on the sidelines. Sarah was waiting when she got home, laptop open, news pulled up on the screen. You need to see this, her roommate said without preamble. The headline made Vivian's blood run cold. Federal agents execute major raid on suspected organized crime operations. Below it, details about multiple warehouses hit simultaneously, arrests being made, prosecutors calling it a significant victory in their long-running investigation. And there, 3 paragraphs in, was Damien's name. They're calling him the architect of a major criminal network, Sarah read quietly, saying this could be the break they needed to finally bring charges. Vivian sank onto the sofa, hands shaking. This was real. This was happening. The man she loved was potentially facing federal prosecution, and she'd chosen to stay. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Cross, this is Special Agent Jennifer Morrison with the FBI. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Damien Moretti. Vivian's heart stopped. I don't have to talk to you without a lawyer. That's absolutely your right. But I think you should know, we're very interested in understanding the nature of your relationship with Mr. Moretti. How you met, what you know about his business operations, whether you've observed anything that might be relevant to our investigation. I haven't done anything illegal? I'm not suggesting you have, but sometimes people get caught up in situations they don't fully understand. We can help you navigate that, protect you from being charged as an accessory if you cooperate. The threat was thinly veiled. Talk or face prosecution. I need to speak with my attorney, Vivian said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Of course. Here's my card number. When you're ready to talk, call me. Agent Morrison rattled off digits that Vivian didn't bother writing down. Ms. Cross, people who cooperate early get much better deals than those who wait. Just something to consider. The line went dead. Vivian sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, the full weight of her choices crashing down. This wasn't theoretical anymore. The FBI was actively recruiting her as a witness against Damien. What did they say? Sarah asked carefully. They want me to testify against him, offered to protect me if I cooperate. Vivian's laugh was borderline hysterical. I've been dating him for 3 weeks, and I'm already being treated like a criminal. Maybe you should talk to them. Tell them you don't know anything, that you just met him. And betray him? Give them ammunition to use against the man I love? Vivian, listen to yourself. You barely know him. Yes, it's intense and romantic, but is it worth going to prison for? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Vivian thought about Damien's hands framing her face. His confession of love delivered with desperate honesty. The way he'd built walls to protect her even while drawing her deeper into his life. I don't know what I know about his business, she said slowly. I've never been present during illegal activity, never participated in anything criminal, but I know who he is. Someone who clawed his way out of poverty to build something powerful, who takes care of the people in his neighborhoods, who loves his mother's memory and cooks pasta from scratch and looks at me like I'm the most important person in his world. That doesn't change what he does for a living. No, but it makes him more than just a criminal. Vivian met her roommate's worried gaze. I'm not testifying against him, Sarah. Whatever happens, I'm not doing that. Then you need a lawyer, a really good one. Damien said he'd provide one. Using money from his criminal enterprise? From his legitimate businesses. He's been careful to keep me separate from anything illegal. Sarah shook her head slowly. I hope you know what you're doing. So did Vivian. But as the hours stretched with no word from Damien, fear gnawed at her certainty. What if he'd been arrested? What if the raid had produced enough evidence for immediate charges? What if she never saw him again outside a courtroom? At midnight, her phone finally buzzed. I'm outside. Can I come up? Vivian was at the door in seconds, pulling it open to find Damien in the hallway, looking exhausted and shaken. She dragged him inside into her arms, holding him with fierce relief. You're okay, she whispered. For now. He clung to her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. They took everything from the warehouse. Computers, records, products. My lawyers are working damage control, but it's bad, Vivian. Really bad. She guided him to the sofa, keeping him close. What happens now? Now we wait to see what they found. Whether it's enough to bring charges. He pulled back to look at her face. The FBI contacted you. It wasn't a question. Agent Morrison. She wants me to cooperate with their investigation. Something dangerous flashed in Damien's eyes. What did you say? That I needed to talk to my lawyer. Then I hung up. Vivian cupped his face. I'm not helping them build a case against you. You should. If they're offering protection. No. Her voice was firm. I told you I was staying. That means actually staying, not jumping ship the first time things get difficult. This is more than difficult. This is watching everything I've built potentially burn while people I trusted make deals to save themselves. His voice cracked slightly. I wouldn't blame you for doing the same. I'm not them. Vivian kissed him softly. I love you. And I don't know much about your world, but I know what loyalty means. You've protected me from the beginning. Let me return the favor. Damien's arms came around her, pulling her into his lap, holding her like she was precious and breakable. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They stayed like that for a long time, finding comfort in each other while the investigation churned around them. Eventually, exhaustion won, and they moved to Vivian's small bedroom, collapsing together fully clothed on top of the covers. Stay, Vivian murmured as sleep pulled at her. Just for tonight. Let the world wait until morning. Okay, Damien agreed quietly. Just for tonight. But morning brought new complications. Vivian woke to her phone ringing with her boss's number and Damien's tense expression as he checked his own messages. Don't answer yet, he said. Let me get my lawyer on the line first. But Vivian was tired of hiding. She answered the call, putting it on speaker. Vivian, we need to talk. Her boss's voice was carefully professional. I've been contacted by federal agents asking questions about you, about your relationship with someone they're investigating. I know. I'm sorry, Richard. I never intended for my personal life to affect the agency. I'm not calling to fire you. I'm calling to make sure you understand the position this puts us in. We work with corporate clients who can't afford even the appearance of impropriety. I understand. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're dating someone the FBI thinks runs a criminal organization. That's not just appearance, Vivian. That's actual association with illegal activity. Damien's hand found hers, squeezing gently. I haven't done anything illegal, Vivian said firmly. And I won't let my personal relationships compromise the agency's work. If you need me to take a leave of absence while this is investigated, I think that's best. Paid leave, until this situation resolves itself. Richard's tone softened slightly. You're talented, Vivian. I'd hate to lose you over this, but I need to protect the agency. I understand. Thank you for the consideration. The call ended. Vivian set down her phone carefully, trying to process that she'd just been effectively suspended from her job because of who she loved. I'm sorry, Damien said quietly. Don't apologize for other people's fear. She turned to face him. I made my choice. I'll deal with the consequences. Let me help. I can... No. No money, no lawyers fixing this specific problem. If I'm going to lose my job over loving you, it needs to be my decision, not something you orchestrated to protect me. Understanding flickered in his eyes. You need to own your choices. Exactly. Even when they cost you? Especially then. Vivian managed a tired smile. Besides, maybe it's time I went freelance, stopped letting other people's judgment dictate my worth. Damien kissed her forehead. You're extraordinary. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. The next week was a masterclass in pressure. FBI agents showed up at Vivian's apartment building asking neighbors questions. Her phone rang constantly with unknown numbers. Friends from her past called, concerned about the rumors they'd heard. Even Adrian reached out with a carefully worded message expressing shock and offering help that felt more like judgment. Through it all, Damien was a constant presence, not hovering, but available, providing support without trying to control her responses. He connected her with one of his lawyers, a sharp woman named Patricia, who explained Vivian's rights and options without trying to influence her decisions. You haven't committed any crimes, Patricia explained during their first meeting. Being in a relationship with someone under investigation isn't illegal, but the FBI will try to pressure you into cooperation by making everything in your life difficult. How difficult? Your bank accounts might be frozen while they investigate whether you've received illicit funds. Your tax returns will be audited. People you know will be interviewed. It's designed to make you feel isolated and desperate enough to make a deal. Vivian swallowed hard. And if I don't? Then eventually they'll either charge you with something or leave you alone. But it could take months, possibly years. Years of living under investigation. Years of suspicion and scrutiny and watching everything she'd built potentially crumble. But when Vivian looked at Damien sitting beside her, his hand warm in hers, she couldn't imagine making any other choice. I can handle it, she said. Patricia smiled approvingly. I believe you can. 2 weeks after the raid, Damien invited Vivian to dinner at his brownstone. She arrived to find him cooking again, the kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic and herbs, wine already poured. Special occasion? She asked, accepting his kiss. I wanted one normal evening. One night where we're just two people having dinner, not crisis management and legal strategy. That sounds perfect. They cooked together, falling into the easy rhythm they'd developed. Damien chopped vegetables while Vivian stirred sauce, their bodies moving around each other with practiced familiarity. It felt domestic and lovely and heartbreakingly normal. Over dinner, Damien told her about his mother's garden in Queens, the tomatoes she'd grown every summer despite the terrible soil. Vivian shared stories about her childhood in Pennsylvania, the small town she'd escaped to find herself in New York. They talked about everything except the investigation, the pressure, the uncertain future looming over them. When dinner ended, they moved to the living room with wine, settling onto the sofa in their usual tangle of limbs. I have something for you, Damien said quietly. He pulled a small box from his pocket, not ring-sized, but close. Vivian's heart stuttered. Inside was a key on a simple silver keychain. To the brownstone, Damien explained, and the Tribeca apartment. Anywhere I have access, you have access. So if you need somewhere safe, somewhere away from the pressure, you always have options. Vivian stared at the key, understanding the weight of what he was offering. Not just physical access, but trust. The kind of trust that could be used against him if she chose to betray it. This is a big step, she said. I know, but I meant what I said about wanting forever with you. His hand cupped her face. I want you in my space, in my life, with complete freedom to come and go as you choose, even if everything falls apart. I want you to know you always have a place with me. Vivian kissed him, slow and deep, trying to convey everything she felt through the connection. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you, she said. Even though you're impossible and dangerous and currently under federal investigation, I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and brave and refusing to take the easy way out, we're quite a pair. The best pair. He pulled her closer. Whatever happens next, we face it together. And sitting there in his arms, the key to his home warm in her palm, Vivian believed him. The investigation would continue. The pressure would intensify, but they would face it together, building something real in the spaces between chaos. She'd started this journey trying to survive her ex-boyfriend's wedding with her dignity intact. She'd ended up finding something far more valuable, a love worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And as Damien kissed her again, the city lights twinkling through the windows, Vivian knew she'd made the right choice. Even if the world thought she was crazy, even if the consequences kept coming. She'd chosen love over safety, truth over convenience, and a dangerous man who looked at her like she hung the stars. That was worth everything. The crisis came exactly 3 months after that first desperate grab in the Grandstone Hotel lobby, though in ways Vivian never anticipated. She woke at 2 in the morning to Damien's phone buzzing insistently. He answered it with the sharp alertness of someone who never truly slept deeply, his voice dropping to that cold, commanding tone that meant serious trouble. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. Vivian sat up, her heart hammering. What happened? One of my people was arrested. They're offering him a deal, 10 years reduced to 2 if he testifies against me. Damien's jaw was tight as he buttoned his shirt. He's going to take it. How do you know? Because he has a daughter, and 10 years means missing her entire childhood. He grabbed his jacket. I'd make the same choice in his position. Damien, stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't answer it for anyone except Marcus. He kissed her quickly, fiercely. I love you. Remember that. The words sounded too much like goodbye. Vivian grabbed his arm before he could leave. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. His eyes met hers, dark and determined. But I won't let you get caught in the fallout. I've made sure of that. Then he was gone, leaving Vivian alone in the brownstone with fear gnawing at her chest. She tried to sleep, failed, and ended up pacing the living room until dawn painted the windows gold. Her phone rang at 7. Patricia, Damien's lawyer. Vivian, I need you to listen carefully. Damien's been arrested. The world tilted. What? Federal agents picked him up an hour ago. They have testimony from multiple witnesses, evidence from the warehouse raid, financial records that allegedly prove illegal operations. Patricia's voice was professionally calm, but Vivian could hear the concern beneath. They're charging him with racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. Can they make it stick? With the testimony they have? Possibly. It depends on how credible the witnesses are, whether the evidence holds up under scrutiny. A pause. Vivian, they're going to come after you next, hard. They'll want you to corroborate the witnesses' stories, confirm details about Damien's activities. I don't know anything about his business. That might not matter. They can still pressure you, threaten you with obstruction charges if they think you're withholding information. Vivian sank onto the sofa, her hands shaking. What do I do? Tell the truth. You met him at a wedding, started dating, fell in love. You were never involved in his business operations, never present during illegal activities. Stick to that story because it's true. Patricia's tone softened slightly. And Vivian, don't try to protect him by lying. That will only make things worse. The call ended. Vivian sat in Damien's living room, surrounded by his books and art, and the life they'd been building together, and tried to process that the man she loved was in federal custody facing decades in prison. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Cross? It's Agent Morrison. I think it's time we had that conversation. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown, neutral territory where Vivian felt slightly less trapped. Agent Morrison was younger than her voice suggested, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor that didn't quite hide the predatory focus beneath. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Morrison said, sliding into the booth across from Vivian. I know this situation must be very difficult for you. I'm here because my lawyer said I should cooperate with answering basic questions, not because I have information about criminal activity. Fair enough. Let's start simple. How did you meet Mr. Moretti? Vivian told the truth. The wedding, the desperate mistake, the immediate chemistry that had led to everything after. Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. And when did you learn about his business operations? Morrison asked. He told me the first night that he worked in areas that weren't entirely legal, that being with him came with risks. Yet you chose to stay involved. I fell in love with him. That doesn't mean I participated in anything illegal. Morrison leaned forward slightly. Ms. Cross, we have witnesses who say Damien Moretti runs a sophisticated criminal organization. Import operations, protection rackets, money laundering through legitimate businesses. Are you telling me you never observed any of this? I'm telling you he kept me completely separate from his work. I never attended business meetings, never met his associates in that context, never saw anything that would constitute evidence. Convenient for him. Protective of me. Vivian met the agent's gaze directly. Whatever you think of Damien, he made sure I couldn't be used as a witness because I genuinely don't know anything useful. Morrison studied her for a long moment. You're either very naive or very loyal. Can't I be both? A slight smile crossed the agent's face. You could also be smart and tell us what we need to know. We can protect you, Ms. Cross. Make sure you're not charged as an accessory. Help you move on from this relationship with your life intact. My life is intact, and I don't need protection from someone I chose to love. Even if that choice costs you everything? Vivian thought about her suspended job, the friends who'd stopped calling, the constant surveillance that had become her new normal. She'd already lost so much. Yes, she said firmly. Even then. Morrison sighed and closed her notebook. I hope you don't regret that loyalty when he's convicted. Because with the evidence we have, that's where this is heading. The words haunted Vivian as she left the coffee shop, as she returned to the brownstone that felt too empty without Damien, as the days blurred into a nightmare of legal proceedings and media attention. The arraignment was a circus. Cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions, crowds of protesters and supporters creating chaos outside the courthouse. Vivian sat in the gallery with Patricia, watching Damien appear in an orange jumpsuit that made him look smaller, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. His eyes found hers immediately. Even across the courtroom, even surrounded by federal marshals and prosecutors, the connection between them felt electric and absolute. The charges were read. Damien pled not guilty. Bail was set at $5 million, an amount designed to keep him locked up, but his lawyers posted it within hours using assets from his legitimate businesses. He was released on house arrest, an ankle monitor tracking his every movement, forbidden from contacting anyone associated with his alleged criminal operations. Vivian was waiting when he returned to the brownstone, and the moment the door closed behind his security detail, she was in his arms. I'm okay, he murmured against her hair, though they both knew it was a lie. Nothing about this was okay. What happens now? Now we prepare for trial. My lawyers will attack the witness's credibility, challenge the evidence, try to create reasonable doubt. He pulled back to cup her face. It's going to get uglier before it gets better. I can handle ugly. Can you handle testifying? Because the prosecution might call you, try to get you to confirm details about my lifestyle, the money I spent, places we went together. Patricia said to tell the truth. She's right. Don't lie for me, Vivian. Don't risk perjury. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I've protected you this far. Let me finish the job by making sure you walk away clean when this is over. When what's over? When you're convicted? When you go to prison for 20 years? Her voice cracked. I didn't fall in love with you to watch you sacrifice yourself. I'm not sacrificing myself. I'm accepting consequences for choices I made long before I met you. He kissed her softly. But you? You get to have a future, a career, a life, maybe eventually someone who can give you the normal relationship you deserve. I don't want normal. I want you. You might not have that choice. The words were brutal and honest and absolutely true. Vivian felt them settle into her bones, the terrible understanding that love wasn't always enough to overcome reality. The trial began 6 weeks later. Vivian attended every day, sitting in the same seat in the gallery, watching prosecutors build their case with methodical precision. The witnesses were compelling, former associates who described Damien's operations in detail, financial experts who traced money through shell companies, FBI agents who presented surveillance evidence. The defense fought back hard, attacking witnesses' credibility, highlighting inconsistencies, arguing that the government's case relied on speculation rather than concrete proof. But even Vivian could see the prosecution was winning. On the 11th day of trial, she was called to testify. Walking to the witness stand felt like moving through water, everything slow and surreal. She was sworn in, took her seat, and forced herself to meet Damien's eyes. He looked calm, controlled, but she could see the fear beneath. The prosecutor was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a voice like a teacher explaining why you'd failed. Ms. Cross, how long have you known the defendant? 4 months. And during that time you've been romantically involved? Yes. Can you describe the lifestyle Mr. Moretti maintained, the places he took you, the money he spent? Vivian told the truth. Expensive restaurants, the brownstone in a wealthy neighborhood, designer clothes, a car service that appeared whenever needed. She didn't embellish, but she didn't minimize either. And did you ever question where this money came from? The prosecutor asked. He told me he had both legitimate businesses and operations that existed in legal gray areas. I knew generally what he did. But you chose to continue the relationship anyway? I fell in love with him. That doesn't mean I participated in illegal activity. No? But you benefited from it. Wore clothes bought with illegal proceeds, ate meals paid for with criminal profits, lived in luxury funded by the very operations we're prosecuting. Patricia stood immediately. Objection? Argumentative and assuming facts not in evidence. Sustained, the judge said. Rephrase, counsel. The prosecutor smiled thinly. Miss Cross, did you ever witness Mr. Moretti conducting business that you believed to be illegal? No? Never saw suspicious meetings, transactions that seemed questionable? He kept me completely separate from his business operations. How convenient for him. The same words Agent Morrison had used. Or perhaps you're just being loyal to the man you love. I'm telling the truth. I don't know details about his business because he made sure I couldn't be used against him. The prosecutor's expression sharpened. So you acknowledge that Mr. Moretti deliberately shielded you from his activities because he knew they were criminal? Vivian's heart sank. She'd walked right into the trap. I acknowledge he kept his work separate from his personal life, she said carefully. Why he made that choice, you'd have to ask him. The prosecutor asked a few more questions, trying to shake her testimony, but Vivian held firm. She knew nothing concrete. She'd seen nothing specific. She was a woman who'd fallen in love with the wrong man but hadn't committed any crimes. When the defense's turn came, Patricia kept it brief. Miss Cross, did you ever participate in any illegal activity with Mr. Moretti? No. Were you ever present during business meetings or discussions that involved criminal operations? Never. Did Mr. Moretti ever ask you to lie to authorities or hide evidence? He told me to tell the truth, always. Thank you. No further questions. Vivian was dismissed. She returned to her seat, hands shaking, feeling like she'd both helped and hurt Damien in ways she couldn't fully measure. The trial continued for another week. More witnesses, more evidence, arguments, and counter-arguments that blurred together. Finally, closing statements. The prosecutor painted Damien as a calculating criminal who'd built an empire on fear and illegal activity, who'd corrupted everything he touched and deserved to be locked away for decades. Patricia countered by highlighting the lack of direct evidence, the questionable credibility of witnesses who'd taken deals to reduce their own sentences, the government's reliance on circumstantial connections rather than proof of Damien's personal involvement in specific crimes. Then it went to the jury. The wait was excruciating. Vivian spent it at the brownstone, unable to eat or sleep, pacing the rooms where she'd fallen in love, while Damien sat on the sofa with his ankle monitor, trying to read but mostly just staring at nothing. Whatever happens, he said on the second day of deliberations, I need you to promise me something. Don't. Promise me you'll move on. Build the life you deserve. Don't waste years waiting for someone who might never get out of prison. I'm not making that promise. Vivian, no. She moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. You don't get to love me and then ask me to forget you. That's not how this works. I'm trying to give you freedom. I don't want freedom from you. I want you. She took his hands. Whatever the jury decides, we face it together. That's what we promised. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened, they were bright with unshed tears. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. We've established that. I'm staying anyway. The verdict came on the third day. The courtroom was packed, cameras ready to broadcast the moment to the world. Vivian sat between Patricia and Sarah, who'd insisted on coming for moral support despite her reservations about Damien. The jury filed in. Vivian tried to read their expressions, failed, felt her heart hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The foreman stood holding a piece of paper that held Damien's entire future. On the charge of racketeering, we find the defendant not guilty. Vivian's breath caught. Damien's shoulders tensed, but he didn't move. On the charge of money laundering, we find the defendant not guilty. Patricia's hand found Vivian's, squeezing hard. On the charge of conspiracy, we find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, but the chaos was immediate and overwhelming. Vivian couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears, couldn't process that Damien was actually free. He turned in his seat, finding her across the chaos, and his expression was pure disbelief and desperate relief. The formalities took another hour. Motions filed and denied, the ankle monitor removed, Damien officially released from all charges. By the time they made it out of the courthouse, Vivian was shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. The media crush was insane. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, protesters and supporters creating a wall of noise. Marcus and two other security guards formed a barrier, guiding them to the waiting car. Inside the vehicle, finally alone, Damien pulled Vivian into his arms and held her like he'd never let go. "We won," she whispered against his chest. "You stayed," he replied, and his voice cracked on the words. "Through everything, you stayed. I told you I would." They went back to the brownstone, both too overwhelmed to do anything except sit together on the sofa, processing that the nightmare was actually over. "What happens now?" Vivian asked eventually. "Now I rebuild, more carefully this time. Shut down anything that can't stand up to scrutiny, invest in legitimate operations, create distance from anything questionable." He tilted her face up toward his. "I learned something from almost losing everything. Some things are worth more than power or money." "Like what?" "Like you. Like having someone who looks at me and sees a person worth loving, not just a useful connection or a threat to avoid." He kissed her softly. "I want a different life, Vivian. One where I'm not constantly calculating risks or waiting for the next federal investigation. I want normal dinners and quiet weekends and a future that doesn't involve lawyers." "That's a big change. I'm motivated, because the alternative is losing you eventually, and I can't survive that." Vivian felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You're not going to lose me." "Promise?" "Promise." They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like relief and new beginnings. The next few months were a study in transformation. Damien systematically dismantled his criminal operations, selling assets, severing connections, walking away from revenue streams that had made him wealthy but kept him constantly vulnerable. He invested heavily in legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate development, an art gallery that supported emerging artists like he'd once mentioned wanting to do. It wasn't easy. People who'd depended on his protection felt abandoned. Rivals tried to move into territories he vacated. The FBI watched his every move, waiting for him to slip back into old patterns. But Damien was determined, and Vivian watched him rebuild himself with the same strategic brilliance he'd once applied to criminal enterprise. Her own life transformed too. With the trial over and charges dismissed, the cloud of suspicion lifted. Her former boss reached out, apologizing for the suspension and offering her position back. She declined politely and started her own freelance design business instead, taking on projects she actually cared about rather than whatever paid the bills. 6 months after the verdict, Damien took her back to the Grandstone Hotel. "Why are we here?" Vivian asked as they walked through the lobby where everything had started. "Because I want to rewrite our beginning." He led her to the exact spot where she'd grabbed his arm in desperate panic. "You were terrified and brave and absolutely stunning, and I was cynical and dangerous and convinced I'd never feel anything real again. And now? Now I know better." He pulled a small box from his pocket, the ring-sized kind. Vivian's breath stopped. "I'm not the man you thought I was that night," Damien said quietly. "I'm not a hired escort or a convenient prop. But I want to be your real fiancé, Vivian, your real husband. The person who makes you coffee in the morning and argues with you about pasta and loves you so completely that everything else fades into background noise." He opened the box. The ring inside was perfect, elegant, beautiful, exactly her style, without being ostentatious. "Marry me," he said, "not because you're desperate or trying to impress anyone. Marry me because you choose me, knowing exactly who I am and what I've done. Marry me because we turned the biggest mistake of your life into the best decision either of us ever made." Vivian was crying openly now, not caring who saw. "Yes, Yes, of course, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then kissed her with fierce joy and desperate relief. Around them, hotel guests stopped to watch, some pulling out phones to record the moment, but Vivian didn't care. She'd come to this hotel broken and humiliated, planning to fake her way through one evening. She was leaving it engaged to a man who'd transformed his entire life because loving her had made him want to be better. They were married 3 months later in a small private ceremony at the brownstone, surrounded by the handful of people they actually trusted. Sarah stood as Vivian's maid of honor, still skeptical but willing to support her friend's choice. Marcus and Patricia attended as witnesses, having evolved from employees to genuine friends. Vivian wore a simple ivory dress that made her feel beautiful without trying too hard. Damien wore a dark suit and looked at her like she was the only person in the universe. The vows were traditional but heartfelt. Damien's voice cracked when he promised to love and cherish her. Vivian's hands shook when she slid his ring into place. When the officiant pronounced them married, Damien kissed her with the same intensity he'd shown in that bathroom at Adrian's wedding, the kiss that had changed everything. "Mrs. Moretti," he murmured against her lips, "that's going to take some getting used to. We have forever to practice." The reception was intimate and perfect. Good food, better wine, conversations that flowed easily without the pressure of impressing anyone. Marcus gave a surprisingly heartfelt toast about watching his boss fall in love and become almost human in the process. Patricia spoke about the power of choosing loyalty over convenience. When Sarah stood, Vivian braced herself. "I thought my best friend was insane," Sarah said with typical bluntness. "Falling for a stranger at her ex's wedding? Getting involved with someone under federal investigation? Risking everything for a relationship that was barely a month old?" She raised her glass toward Vivian and Damien. But watching them together, seeing how he looks at her like she hung the moon, and she looks at him like he's worth any risk, I realized she wasn't insane. She was just braver than I could have been. To Vivian and Damien, may your love always be worth the chaos. Everyone drank to that. Later, when the guests had left and they were alone in the brownstone that was now officially their shared home, Damien pulled Vivian onto the sofa where they'd spent so many evenings. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely. You?" "More than I thought possible." He kissed her temple. "Thank you." "For what?" "For grabbing my arm in a hotel lobby. For gambling on a dangerous stranger. For staying when every rational instinct said to run." His arms tightened around her. "For loving me enough to make me want to be someone worthy of you." "You were always worthy. You just needed someone to see it." They sat together as night fell over the city. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something real from desperate beginnings. Vivian thought about Adrian's wedding, the humiliation that had driven her to that hotel lobby. She wondered briefly if he'd heard about her marriage to Damien Moretti, if he regretted his choices, if he was happy with Margot. Then she decided she didn't care. Adrian belonged to a past that felt distant and irrelevant. Her present and her future was wrapped around her in the form of a reformed criminal who loved her with fierce devotion and made exceptional pasta. "What are you thinking?" Damien asked. "That the worst mistake of my life led me to the best thing that ever happened to me." "Funny. I was thinking the same thing." He tilted her face up toward his. "I love you, Mrs. Moretti. I love you too, even though you're impossible. Especially because I'm impossible." He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, with the kind of focused attention that still made her knees weak. "Come to bed. I want to show my wife exactly how impossible I can be." Vivian laughed and let him pull her to her feet, let him lead her upstairs to their bedroom, let herself fall completely into the beautiful chaos they'd created together. She'd walked into a wedding planning to fake her way through one evening with a hired companion. She'd walked out having found real love with a dangerous stranger who'd seen her desperation and chosen to play along instead of walking away. One impulsive grab in a hotel lobby. One man who'd agreed to the charade instead of correcting her mistake. One night that had rewritten both their futures. And now, years of possibility stretched ahead. Mornings waking up together, evenings cooking in the kitchen, quiet moments on the sofa with wine and conversation. Building a legitimate life, supporting each other's dreams, proving that even the most unlikely love stories could have happy endings. Vivian Cross had gambled everything on a stranger in a moment of desperate humiliation. Damian Moretti had transformed his entire life because loving her made him want to be better. Together, they'd turned one reckless mistake into forever. And that was the most extraordinary thing of all.